Well, cheers.
Cheers.
Welcome to Steve's studio in Beijing.
Thanks for having me.
I guess, yeah. Well, so I guess, how do I introduce this? I typically record it afterwards, but I can record it right now. Today is Saturday, September 26th, 2020, and this is episode 17 of my podcast. My name is Steven Sersky. Thank you very much for joining me, and this is Nataly Ba, my guest today. We are colleagues, co-workers, friends, and neighbors, as she lives just across the way from me here in Beijing. She is here today. Actually, she's not just a neighbor anymore. She's soon to be a fellow compatriot, I believe, if everything goes well.
Yeah.
Right. But I asked her a couple weeks ago if she'd be interested in coming on to talk a little bit about what she studied beforehand, which is traditional Chinese medicine, and then also about life in China and whatnot, and whatever else sort of happens. So thank you very much for joining me. Welcome to the studio. Literally.
Very cozy.
The actual studio apartment is being used as a studio. Yeah, so you've been in China probably longer than me. 6, 7 years, 8 years, 7 years.
No, coming up to 9 years now.
Fuck.
Yep, I arrived September 2nd, 2011.
Okay.
Yeah, with the idea of studying Chinese medicine. But at the time I wasn't sure whether I wanted to study it in Chinese or in English. Of course, I had this very rose-tinted glasses idea of, coming here, immersing myself in the culture and in the language, and, Chinese medicine being, Chinese medicine. I was scared that a lot would be lost in translation, so I wanted to study it in Chinese. But yeah, being a mature student and having to finance it myself meant that I needed to work here.
Oh, yeah.
which meant basically that I ended up having to work 3 different jobs. The first year I did study Chinese language, and after the first year, studying the language intensely and working, I needed to sit down and really assess the plausibility of being able to study a language and study material
and function
and function and have a life and all together. So the interesting thing that happened was that I met one of the oldest professors of Chinese medicine, Chinese woman, quite famous. So I went to her to get treatment.
Who was that?
To be honest, her name slipped my mind now. This is like 8 years ago.
Well, she was that famous. I gotcha.
She's since passed, actually.
Oh, okay.
So whoops. Anyway, so I sat with her. My ex-partner at the time was getting treatment from her. I also was getting treatment from her. So I sat with her and I was like, listen, I know that you are a professor at the university, and I'd really like to get your advice on what to do. And she sat me down very seriously and said, Chinese medicine, there's so much in the nuances of the language and the culture that yes, I understand that a lot will be lost, so I actually advise you to study it in Chinese. So I'm sitting there holding my head in my hands thinking, oh crap, and then she went, wait a minute, but are you in the international department or in the Chinese department? I was like, international. So she went, English, Chinese, then it doesn't matter. So, bittersweet sort of.
Why wouldn't it matter though? Like, was she sort of of the understanding that it was also that you're going to lose something in translation as well?
Yeah, it wasn't so much in translation, just how the department was run.
Oh. Better or worse?
Ooh, much worse.
The international was worse.
The international department was worse.
Wow. Can we name where you studied, or do you not want to name that?
To be honest, I would really like to name that because there was a group of us that were just disappointed with the experience.
Right.
So yes, we did agree when we graduated to just be honest about the experience, because I mean there as with everything, you have the positive and you have the negative. It's just that I find, and we found, that a lot of people come to China not knowing, come to China to study at this university not knowing the negatives.
Oh, okay.
Because there's not much information about China.
Right, so what would the
In the
negatives be
West.
then?
The negatives were, I mean, it's not that I have gripes about the education system at the moment anyway.
That's a given. Most people have gripes about how
Exactly.
things in terms of the education
So
structure.
a lot of the issues that we had with the university were just the same issues that everyone's having having problems with around the world, but times 100.
Okay.
Because it's a different system. Chinese medicine traditionally was taught as an apprenticeship. You find a doctor and you mentor under this person.
Which makes sense.
Exactly. So you're working with this person for at least a decade. Of course, much more.
And you probably start young too.
And you start young. It's a lot of the times it's a family business, so
Yeah.
it stays within the family. So yeah, from when you are born, you are part of the lineage. It's a lineage system. And then now you have so not to get too bogged down with dates and who changed what and whatever, but yeah, so Mao came in and wanted to sort of take Chinese medicine and use it as a way to push Chinese culture and share Chinese culture around the world.
Mm-hmm.
So he put in a lot of money into Chinese medicine to kind of revive it. And in doing so, it wasn't exactly at his time, but it was a little bit later on where they started to change the system and try to make it more of a Western standardized education model, which meant let's throw out the apprenticeships
Right.
and bring in, bachelor's, master's, PhDs, where you go into school, you have different lecturers come in and teach you things, and then you graduate and off you go. But you had all these professors and teachers that didn't work that way. They didn't come from that, so lecturing was difficult for them.
I can imagine, because it's like with that change, it's not like they had a leeway with it. It was like once that semester ended, they were given a notice, and then the next semester they were told, okay, this is how you're going to do it.
I wouldn't be surprised.
And you're going, okay, so I have to go from a lifelong teaching approach to bookwork, basically.
Yeah. And that's how it was for a lot of, I mean, that's not to say that we didn't have, well, I wouldn't even say a handful. There were 2 or 3 professors that were excellent. And a few that you could see that they were good doctors. You could see that they knew their stuff. They just didn't know how to teach. And then on top of that was the language barrier.
Okay.
So we had 2 professors that actually spoke good English, and then the rest struggled.
Yeah.
So.
Which isn't their fault. I mean, they're in the international program.
No.
Probably mostly for the money, because it probably paid more.
No, well, I don't know whether it paid more, to be honest. But hearing how much they were getting paid was a shocker to see how little they were getting paid. And I mean, it was just a lot of things that compounded why they just weren't. Uh, they weren't enthusiastic about their job. They weren't trying anything new. They were just. I mean, we had one professor in particular, and she was one where she knew her stuff. But language was a barrier, and yeah, it was a PPT style where she was just reading off the PPT, and the PPT was a copy paste of the book.
Right.
So you mentioned earlier, why would I sit in a classroom where I can just read the book? This was,
Exactly what it was.
Exactly what that was.
Well,
and you'd ask her a question to clarify something that she said, and she'd just reread the same sentence, and it's well, that's not why I asked. I'm not hard of hearing.
right.
I can hear what you said. I just don't understand
It's
what
a concept
you said.
that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was having to fill in the blanks ourselves a
So
lot.
In that case, when someone studies traditional Chinese medicine here or anywhere, is it like a biology class where you get a dead frog and you cut the thing up, or is it more like, I don't know, a classics course, and you study bookwork basically?
Well, we had it's again the use of the word traditional Chinese medicine doesn't really apply here anymore. So we
Okay.
study Chinese medicine because
Okay.
Chinese medicine now is an inclusion of Western medicine. So we had, let's say, 40% of the course being Western medicine courses, which, in all honesty, I like, and for what I was looking for, I really appreciated that structure, because for me, it wasn't so much my interest in Chinese medicine. I am interested in medicine and healing the person, the body, the mind, all of it, a holistic approach. And that means incorporating all different disciplines to try and help the person as best as you can. So, yeah, to sort of draw a line in the sand and say, right, this is where you are and this is where we are, and we don't talk and we don't, no, that's not how I see things. So I didn't have issues with that at all. Some people do, some people did.
In what way though? I mean, because you're saying it's Chinese
that it
medicine.
wasn't traditional Chinese medicine. It wasn't just, we weren't just being taught
Okay.
Chinese medicine.
The ancient technique
Exactly.
of.
Exactly.
I don't want to make the, shaking the leaves over to someone and going, okay, now I'm purifying your essence.
That's not Chinese medicine.
Well, but that's people have this image. It's like where you have you say certain words and it fixes something, like almost shamanistic in a way. But that's not. I mean, Chinese.
Well,
and this is actually I want to ask you.
Yeah.
When someone asks you about Chinese medicine or traditional Chinese medicine, what are the things that they should have in mind? I mean, is it the teas? Is it the herbs? Is it something else?
Well, so Chinese medicine. Right now, how it's practiced is that you have the acupuncture, which is needling of certain points that follow the meridians in the body. And then you have the tuina, which, it's connected to acupuncture in that it can use, a big aspect of it actually is the use of the meridians to find certain places that are in disharmony. But with tuina, as well as acupuncture, but tuina a little bit more so, which is Chinese massage, sorry. It's also...
Tuina, push, pull. Okay,
Exactly.
I'm thinking of the characters, man. Which one is it? Okay.
Well done. I see your Chinese language learning is really coming along.
It took a while.
Which actually, this is the modern use of, modern word for what is essentially massage, but you have different schools, and tuina is the more modern. Like, you also had other characters that were used, and more, and other ones based on which school you studied manipulation of the body.
Right.
So tuina and moi and all the others is manipulation of the body.
Anmois would be the one that's most commonly referred to. Like whenever Tuena, it probably has a much more direct meaning, but Anmois is more like your, I don't want to say sensual massage, but it's not like they're going and cracking bones and stuff like that.
So Tuena is used, it's supposed to be used in a diagnostic and treatment way, whereas Anmois is nowadays, because it didn't start off that way, Anmois was another way of diagnosing and treating patients. But now when you walk down the streets of China,
it's all
and
Anmois.
Anmois is like your massage, you know, and it's I mean, as you said, it's not sensual massage, but it's relaxing massage.
Relaxing,
yes,
yeah. Or what do you call it? Where it's like not pacifying. It's not meant to do anything more than like relax the body.
And Shen.
Yeah.
And well, Shen, Ti and Shen.
Right.
So yeah, acupuncture, Tuena, herbs, so herbal medicine as well. Am I missing anything now?
Does the tea fall into that? Because most people would know the herbs that go into Chinese medicine.
Well, preventative medicine. So
Okay.
preventative medicine, that would include the teas, the tonics, the nutrition. You also have, of course, the addition of body exercises. So you have cultivating, like body cultivation exercises. So all of these need to go together as a holistic way of treating the person.
So it's 3 different parts. Acupuncture, massage,
massage. 4 different parts. So and herbs and body cultivation.
Body cultivation.
However, body cultivation has sort of lost.
So what is body cultivation?
Importance. Body cultivation. Different practices. You have the qigong, you have the tai chi, you have the baguanjin, you have from what I understand, speaking to different lecturers and different people, is that they all came from the Daoyin exercises. There's like an ancient depiction of these movements and stances that a person takes, and from that came all the different aspects and all the different faces of body cultivation movements. I don't know how true that is, because I don't know. I mean, I can't say that I have very good I've cultivated relationships with masters and you know, people that have a lot of experience in this. Language was a barrier for me, and also time was a barrier, having to work and study and at the time I also had a partner, so relationship and all of that together was all a bit much.
Chinese partner or foreign partner?
Foreign.
Okay. So
But someone who's been living here for 2 decades. So.
Oh, right. But they could have helped you sort of.
And yes,
you hadn't been to China before that.
No,
Okay.
I knew nothing of China before coming here. I sort of fell into China by.
A lot of people do. It sounds like a lot of people do, actually. It's not a very direct. I mean, there's 2 schools. You either fall into here, or that you're kind of like you premeditated, like you studied Chinese or something. You had some sort of love affair, like you saw a Bruce Lee movie years ago, and you're like, fuck, I want to go there.
Exactly.
I need to go to this place. Find the chi, and you're like, well, it's not like that anymore, really. Things have changed a lot, especially in the last decade, from what I'm told. I mean, I've only been here 6 years. But people who've been here 10 years, they say after the Olympics, things changed. And then before the Olympics, it was like night and day compared to today. So.
I mean, I would have loved to have been here before the Olympics. I think I would have fallen in love with China the way that those people...
That people talk about.
Fell in love with China, exactly.
Not how they talk about it today, where they're like, yeah, it's a job, it's a place to be.
In all honesty, I have a very sort of abusive relationship with China.
Yeah, and you're not the only one. You're not.
Yeah, I mean, there are days where I love it, and there are days where I just don't.
So what are the
And I
days that
don't-
you don't? Like, what would sort of make it a day that you don't love it?
When things that should be easy are not.
Like what? I mean,
Uh,
I understand what you mean. There have been times
Yeah.
where, and whenever this happens to me, it's usually one of those situations, and this is one of the reasons I actually like going back to Canada, is to remind myself how if I was a Chinese person and I went to Canada and had a similar situation, how they would sit there and go, what are you guys doing here? Why don't you do it
Yeah.
this way instead?
Yeah.
Doesn't that make sense? And then the reverse happens. You come to China, and you think, okay, according to my growing up, my bringing up, this you should you should do it this way, but then it's not done this
Yeah.
way. That always seems to pacify me. Although there are times I'm like, this just doesn't make sense. I can't get on board with this. Like
Yeah.
half the employment out there, I see people standing around in jobs. I'm like, you aren't necessary. You will be replaced.
But the thing is, once you get out of that perspective and see it from the outside, there's so much about how things work here that work for here.
Yes.
And I have to admit, I am in awe of how things are done. Like, it's a massive country with an insane population.
Lots of people.
Lots of
All
people
over the
doesn't
place.
even begin to describe how many people. I honestly feel like after leaving China, I've like hit my people target 3 lifetimes.
Everything
So-
else is pasture land compared to walking through a
Pretty
Chinese
much.
city.
So to have all this organized, to have all this police, to have jobs enough, to have food enough, to have everything enough is amazing. Like it's an amazing feat how they do everything here. And then you compare like the COVID situation right now, what's happening here and what's happening abroad. Like you cannot.
With the COVID, I suspect there might be other powers that be that are helping the situation along in certain geographic areas.
Okay, I'm not gonna get into the conspiracy theory ideas.
Yeah, I know,
of
because I
what's
see it, like,
going on.
I do, I'm a lot of people back in Canada and the United States, the whole mask debate is a political argument now. Whereas here, it was like, just wear a mask. And then people did. But
It
it's
wasn't
there.
so much wear a mask. It was wear a mask.
Yeah, there was no like your freedoms are
Exactly.
being trampled upon. It was like it's mandatory to wear a mask.
Exactly.
And even when they started phasing it out, it was you still had to bring one with you. You still have to bring one
Yeah.
with you apparently. And then it's recommended that you do. And then any place like a mall, they still I think a lot of them require you to have a mask
Yeah.
at least upon entrance.
Yeah.
And then restaurants and things like that. So it's not you have the freedom to wear one or not outside, but once you're inside, you have to respect the fact that there are other people around you.
Exactly, and other people have different ideas. So better safe than not.
The one good thing that I've seen come out of this whole thing is that things are a lot cleaner in general. Hand sanitation, the soap in all
yes,
toilets.
I must admit I am
Hot
loving
water in more
that.
places.
Yes.
You're going, wow.
All
This-
we needed was COVID. If I'd known, I would have coughed and spat on a lot more things.
Yeah, but it sort of was. They were moving towards that anyway, especially in the bigger
Yeah.
cities, moving towards the Olympics, because the Olympics is like 2022 is going to be the next big push for like standardizing life in China as it sort of modernizes going forward. But yeah, with the whole hygiene, like even people are a lot more aware of washing their hands and stuff like that. You don't see as much of the agricultural,
Yeah.
land is land and spit is liquid and it waters the land. Yes, you're true. Yes,
Not exactly.
but you can't. In a city, there's germs and it's not the same. It doesn't disperse the same way it does, but in ways that can affect a lot of other people. Whereas in like the small cities that these people come from, I mean, it's a little bit more.
Yeah.
They're spread out.
Yeah.
But so in terms of your education at the university level.
Yeah.
Was it an actual university degree or?
It is. It's a 5-year degree, 4
5
years of
years.
studies and 1 year of an internship. Really, it was an observership.
Right.
Because here, unlike everywhere, well, unlike in other countries where Chinese medicine is taught at a university level, you, as a student, you are not given a student license to practice.
Okay.
So in Canada, once you get to your internship year, you have a student license, so you work in the clinic, and that's how you learn.
Yeah.
In the US, it's the same. In Australia, I'm not sure actually. I did a bit of research, but then I realized I wasn't really interested in living in Australia, so that was the end of that research.
It's far away from everything.
Well, my brother lives there,
Okay.
so that was the initial interest. And I did go there. Beautiful place, absolutely gorgeous.
And no people.
Place. But yeah,
I mean,
it didn't speak to me.
Yeah.
So that was the end of that. But here, you don't get a student license. So when we were at the university, we were flies on the wall. And especially more so, being international students that didn't really speak the language as well. Well, as well as a native speaker.
1,000 words a minute,
Yeah.
writing it down in their
Yeah.
Chinese handwriting. Yeah, it's just like this. And you're like,
Yeah. And it was frustrating because, I have like few memories, especially in the neurology department, where I was really interested, and I knew, because we'd have to do rounds in the morning, so you'd be there at 7 o'clock in the morning, in a Chinese hospital, not a private one, a public one. So
Yes.
so yeah, pretty hardcore. But mostly it was summertime, it was hot, like, the rooms were filled with like the doctors, the patients, the students. And at some point, there was one instance where I was standing there thinking, I'm gonna faint right now, but I do not want to leave the room because I don't want to look like the foreign student that can't hack it.
Yeah.
And then at some point it was like, okay, I either faint on the and then I'm the foreign student that fainted, or I just
You're
pop
like
out for
the
like
thing.
2 minutes and just breathe and then go back in. So yeah, there was this one day that there were a lot less of us. I think we were some of us were rotated out, and there were 5 students. 2 from the Chinese, like 2 Chinese students from the Chinese department, and 3 of us in my group from the international department. And the doctor was asking questions, and I could understand like the bits and pieces. And at some point, he turns around, looks at me, asks me a question, and I knew the answer, and I just couldn't say it. It was like in broken Chinese, because on top of everything, once we got there, we were placed in a hospital that was an integrated hospital, so it was Western medicine and Chinese medicine. So learning Chinese at the university, we learned Chinese that was specific to traditional Chinese medicine.
Right.
And then we get to the hospital and it's Western medicine, so we didn't have the vocabulary for that. So it was just I know what you're asking, I know the answer, but
You couldn't say what
Mala,
Jigga, Nabiar,
Exactly,
Bin
like-
Jigga.
I knew the names of the organs, I knew the name of some systems, but to be articulate enough to answer a question that's about how the system works and what goes wrong with it, and I just couldn't do it. And he looked at me, he could see that I was trying, and I appreciated his look. It was that of like,
Understanding.
yeah,
Do it,
trying to
say
encourage, and then I just went, and he went,
All right.
and
well.
walked off. It was just, it was demoralizing of, getting to just that point where, like, complete awareness where you're lacking, where I was lacking. And I knew that it was going to take another, 5, 6, 10 years for me to be on par with the language and connect all of that with the with the theory, with everything, and be able to practice here, to really learn from masters here. So, yeah, it was disappointing.
So you're saying it's 10 to 15 years basically that then you would feel comfortable talking about Chinese medicine with one of the masters. That's a long commitment.
It's a long yeah.
You are dedicated.
Yeah.
Well, you're almost there though. I mean, 10 years. You're coming up to 10 years. Basically,
Yeah, but it's 10 years where I graduated in 2017 and Mama Hoo Hoo practice, basically. I have a full-time job, and that full-time job takes about, 80%? Well, okay, let's be honest, 70% of my time, and 20%, 10% if I'm wanting to, put, it's a lot of juggling of balls and prioritizing which ones get juggled and which ones need to be put down.
Yeah.
And with our work schedule, like, to see a patient, you need to see them regularly.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's putting a Band-Aid on something that's not working.
Do you have patients right now? Like, do you have people that you consult with or see at all?
I have friends
Right.
that ask questions.
Yeah.
If they need proper treatment, I refer them to people that I know, and I really, I think they're great practitioners. But me as a practitioner, I am not a practitioner. I cannot say that I am a practitioner. And to be honest, I'm struggling even saying that I study Chinese medicine at this point, because if you don't use something, it slowly just disappears. I mean, okay, not disappears, but gets reshuffled in the mind.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, if I'm not studying every day, and that's the thing, I have a study buddy that we are continuously studying. He was studying for the boards in the US to get licensed. I was studying in hopes to this year go to Canada and get licensed, but yeah, COVID plans changed and whatnot. But even then, if you're not practicing on a daily basis, then whatever it is that you study doesn't materialize. So
when you're saying you're studying now, because you're studying to go to Canada, but you
I
review.
Yeah.
So when you had that incident in the hospital where you couldn't say the words, did that sort of kickstart you to learn the words for the Western style of Chinese medicine?
It did. And I bought the books, I got the teacher,
And did it
and I started learning, but then it was the realization that that's a whole other set of things that I needed to learn, so that in the end, what am I going to do with this information?
Right.
If I was to stay here in China and practice here, then I could definitely see the benefits of learning that.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew that my time here had an expiration date, and very, fast coming one. I told myself that I was going to give myself, initially it was 2 years, it got stretched to 3, now we're on to 4.
I think that's pretty common though, a lot of people say that.
But yeah, it's quickly coming to an end. Hopefully by next year I will be out of here. Also because as a foreigner practicing Chinese medicine in China,
is it possible?
It is possible. It's a longish road, because as I said, you cannot get a student license.
Yeah.
So what the system that they put in place is that you need to apply for the licensing program, and that's another 2 years of study, and then after the 2 years you sit the licensing exam.
Okay.
I say that, so it's either you do a master's, which is 3 years, or no, I think the master's is 2 years, the PhD is 3 years, or the other way around, I'm not sure. So you either do that and then sit the exam, or if you don't want to do that, then it's still 2 years of study and you sit the exam. So it's kind of like doing the master's, but you don't get the degree.
Right.
You just do the exam. And the exam is in Chinese, so it's hella difficult. And yes, I said hella.
How was your
So-
reading Chinese?
After during the internship year, it actually got quite good because we needed to write case studies in Chinese.
Oh wow.
So after every department, you needed to write at least 1 or 2 case studies. So I'd be sitting there with like notes that we used to get from the hospital and sit down and write.
And all those notes were in
And-
Chinese.
And all those notes needed to be Chinese.
Handwritten?
Handwritten.
Oh.
Because God forbid you type here. I have a mentor, Thomas Garin, well, more a friend now than a mentor, that was doing his PhD here, and yeah, so he needed to write like the report. He finished his dissertation. He what's the word I'm looking for? Defended it. It got approved, and then he needed to do all the paperwork, and they asked him to get the paperwork done, and it all needed to be handwritten. Don't
For-
ask me
okay.
why.
But at the PhD level, he had to write.
His dissertation he typed,
Okay.
so that you can type, but all the paperwork of then, like from the approval to actually getting the degree, like you needed to fill in all this paperwork and send
So
it to
more like the
whatever body and
administration
whatever.
stuff. That
Yeah,
oh, okay.
exactly. So
Well,
all
I mean
the
that's all
admin-
pre-computers anyway. Or when was
No,
this? A couple years ago?
is
Oh, a couple years
this
ago.
year.
Oh, okay, I'm thinking like 10 years ago
No,
when you
this was
first
this
came here.
year.
Oh wow. Yeah, so, yeah. They do that. They still have that, and they have you have to get it chopped, stamped.
Yeah.
By certain departments, and you
Yeah.
have to go to the right room and talk to the right person.
I needed to do the same thing. So
Right.
with every department, I needed to write the case study and then go to the. I only know the Chinese words now. 2 people needed to sign it: the head of the department and the vice head of the department, I guess. And then that book, because it's a collation of everything, then that book needs to be signed by the head of the international student internship department in the hospital, and then you take it to the university, and then it needs to be stamped there, and then you could submit your casebook thingamabob.
Sounds like a lot of work.
It was a lot of work. It was a lot of grunt work. It was a lot of like running around and having to see people and find people that a lot of the time didn't really have the patience for us because they saw us as the students that didn't really matter.
Well, isn't that what grad students are? I mean, a lot of
No. Well, maybe
top
so.
academic, they look at them like, you're just a grad student. I mean, part of the trial is to see if you actually survive the gauntlet of fire.
My issue was more that how it was seeing the difference in treatment of the Chinese students and then the international students.
Oh, okay. So they didn't take you seriously, basically.
No, they didn't take us seriously.
Did they have a reason for that, like a good reason? Because sometimes, like, you know, even as an English teacher, you see some students and you're just like, you don't care. But then you see other students who are like right into it, showing up to class. They have notes. They're like, well, can I ask you about this? You're going, I was like just released. I mean, okay, so you've got some get-go to you, but was that the same thing in your program?
It was. I find it was primarily connected to the fact that there was a language barrier.
Right.
Because again, in the neurology department, there was one person who spoke, 2 people that spoke English. One of them spoke pretty good English. And they took me and this other guy in my group under their wing, and they really taught us things and wanted to. I mean, it always started the same way. Hi, where are you from?
What's your name?
So exactly.
Are you married?
Well, no, not so much.
Not
It was
that.
just the interest in difference and
Right.
wanting to know our stories, which, after being here for 9 years, I know how it goes, and some days you have the patience for it. Some
But
days
other
you're actually,
days-
and some days you're actually interested in the back and forth of learning their story as well, and other days you just want to be left alone.
Yeah.
It was the same thing at this hospital, but it was also understanding by then that that sort of kind of gets you in the door sometimes. If you take those 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever, even 2 days, 1 week of doing the schmoozing and the
small
chit
talk,
chat,
basically,
exactly, and then they might let you into their world.
Well, but that makes sense. I mean, even as foreigners, I mean, how many foreigners you meet just on the street or something? Most of the foreigners I see on the street, like, we don't look at each other. It's like we are in different worlds.
Fair enough.
And it's like we don't need to talk unless we need to talk, and only after once or twice you realize, okay, yeah, the vetting process.
Yeah.
Yes, that goes into it.
I know, but I feel that I have a bit of a utopic view of the education system.
Yeah.
Of I'm not here to be your friend.
Yeah.
I'm a student. You're a teacher.
You teach me.
You teach
I'm
me.
here to learn
Exactly.
from you. Your type
Exactly.
of people. You're
Exactly.
educated.
I do understand that we have bad days. You know, I was a teacher. You do have bad days, but then you try and remind yourself that it's your bad day.
Yeah.
It has
And it's
nothing
your job.
to do exactly. It has nothing to do with your students. You're here to do a job, and you try and pull yourself out of your funk,
Yeah.
and you do the job. And in these situations, it really was a struggle between, well, a lot of emotions, but mostly resentment. Of just, you know, why do I need to do the song and dance?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not here to do the song and dance. I just want to learn.
And you
I
came
just
as a
hear the
mature student as well, so it's like
Exactly.
you already have that life experience that disables you from the doe-eyed look of a young student who's like, what's going on? And this is
Exactly.
all so fresh. I mean, you've
I
been
mean, don't
through
get me wrong. I was amazed at how different the system is, and because my background is psychology. I did pre-med. I did 1 year of med school, but not all of that. I started off with psychology, wanting to be a psychologist, and then at some point I saw that the brain and the body are connected, and to separate them is not exactly how I want to practice.
Mm-hmm.
So I had an amazing mentor at the university in Cyprus where I was studying, who sat me down and was like, "That's a brilliant idea. Go and find a way to link it." We have, they had a pre-med program at the university, and she's like, "It's a stepping stone. There isn't anything else that's available here, so why not do a dual degree?" So I did, with the idea that, build on top of that. So at the time, I was young. I didn't really have great direction, as people do when they're young. And I just didn't know what questions to ask, because I didn't know what was available.
Yeah.
I'm from Kuwait, small desert country, not much by way of difference from from the norm, let's say.
Right.
So I thought to myself, okay, to be taken seriously in the world of alternative medicine, I need a Western medicine degree. I'm gonna go get a Western medicine degree. So
Which means what? Western medicine being what?
Western medicine being what?
Like surgeon? Not surgeon.
Well, no,
Heart
a
specialist?
GP, let's say.
GP, okay.
Yeah, general practitioner. Just having that as a base,
Right.
just so that I can have the MD on my wall,
Right.
so that when patients come in and I use an alternative form of therapy, they look at the MD and go, okay, she
gotcha,
she knows what she's talking about.
Right.
she's brought out the drums and the leaves and the the chanting, but she's got the MD.
But she got the MD, and so I
Exactly.
mean, other people sort of agree with her in at least some
Exactly.
way.
She's not that much of a loon.
Does that happen though? I mean, because I know one of the current debates it's bubbled up every now and then. It's like when someone calls themselves a doctor, but they're like a historian doctor, and you're going, well, it's Doctor so and so. But unless you're saving people's lives from like dying of not knowing about history, there needs to be some sort of, or does there need to be some sort of division between the medical doctors, which is what MD basically goes for, and like the doctors that are people who are schooled very well in what they know.
To be honest, I don't feel that there needs to be a separation. However, you yourself saying you're a medical doctor and doctor, that is a separation that
Yeah.
a person can use. So,
But
it's
people
really
never
their
introduce
choice.
themselves. I'm a medical doctor, so and so. They just say
Well,
I'm
then-
Doctor so and so.
Then they don't have an issue with the idea of separation.
Does it happen though with like the whole Chinese medicine? Because you said that you started out with this desire to go get the Western medicine education, and then you came to China afterwards. So,
No, and then I went to Serbia.
Okay.
I did a year
Of course, because you couldn't stay in one country.
Oh, I've been all over. Seriously. So I went to Serbia. I was there for a year, and then for financial reasons, and also for other personal reasons, I decided not to stay. It was also speaking to another professor that sat me down and was like, you want to study alternative medicine, like you shared your story, and you don't actually need to put in that, those 7 years to get a degree that in the end you're not really going to be using.
That sounds like good advice that a lot
Yeah.
of people need to hear. Is like you don't need to do that.
Yeah.
Here's an. So
Yeah.
what did he tell you or she tell you?
He actually put me in contact with the University of Westminster in London, because he was a visiting professor there. I don't know whether he still does actually. At the time, he was going there annually for a semester to teach there. And he was just like, they have an amazing herbal medicine program, apply. So, yeah, I applied, I got in,
So you went
and
to
it was...
Westminster after.
No, it was during that time, there was the change in the fees
Okay.
in the UK. So there was that whole uproar. Students were protesting in the streets.
I'm not aware of this.
They wanted to triple the fees.
Okay.
So as an international student there, I would have had to pay, before the increase, £11,500 just for tuition. And then they were thinking of tripling the fees, so I was looking at that and thinking, that's a house. That's like a down payment on a house.
That's an obscene amount of money.
Can I do this? And as an international student, loans, stipends, all of that were not available to me. So when I was having my interview, because I applied, and they called me, they asked me to go to the UK for a face-to-face interview. So I went, had the interview, and at the end of the interview, like usually you have to, you go back to where you came from and you wait for a letter saying,
Right.
yeah, you got in or you didn't. At the end of the last interview, I was taken to one side, and the woman was like, listen, we want you. But we understand that the fees issue is an issue, so can we sit and talk about this? So I was, ecstatic at having been accepted right then and there. And it was a very honest conversation of the only way that this person could see me being able to afford the tuition and living in London was to write every charity foundation and ask for money. So
You got the money.
of course not. If the government wanted to triple the fees, does that usually mean that people have money?
Maybe there was donors or something. Maybe
No,
there was an increase in
I
scholarships
wrote,
as well.
I wrote to quite a few charities, and 3 wrote back, and they apologized profusely for not having the means to help. The most that they could give was £500.
Which doesn't do very much for £33,000.
That's not even, that's what, a week's rent.
Yeah. You're not doing much with that.
So, well, not so much a week's rent, depending on where you're staying, but, so yeah, it wasn't gonna happen.
Right.
So I needed to rethink everything. Well, I did, a lot of things happened from then until China. So yeah, I needed to rethink things and make different decisions, and then China kind of fell into my lap.
how soon was China after the Westminster debacle tuition episode? Was it like right after, or was like there was a bit of other stuff that you had to?
No, actually, the Westminster debacle was just before. It was 2010 or 2009. No. So 2009, or 2008, I went for the interview that
Right.
happened. At the time, I was living in Cyprus, and then I said to myself, okay, I'm from Kuwait. Stop faffing about in Cyprus. And move to the Middle East where the money is and work and save. So I went back with the idea that 2 years, save a bit of money, and then move
But
to
doing
the UK.
what? Working what?
In education.
Okay.
So
And
at-
Middle East. Where do you mean in the Middle East?
I'm from Kuwait, so I was moving.
So
back
it's going
to
back to Kuwait.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in 2006 or 7, I got my TEFL.
Right.
And I was working part-time in Cyprus.
Okay.
while
So the entire
studying as
time you
well.
were teaching English, basically.
I started teaching English in 2006, 5, 6,
Wow.
something like that.
It's 15 years.
I know. So, but yeah, I taught young learners.
Right.
It wasn't until 2007 or 8 that I started to teach adults. But yeah, wasn't really my interest per se. And then I moved to Kuwait, tried to get a job at the British Council. I did what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, I teach English.
Not an interview, like a screening or something. Not a screening.
I had to teach a class where they observed.
A demo.
A demo class, thank you. So I had to do a demo class. They liked what I did, but I didn't have a CELTA. So it was get a CELTA and then come back and we'll hire you on the spot.
Right. The CELTA,
Yeah,
for those
exactly.
people who don't know what the CELTA is, like your TEFL is teaching English as a foreign language, very generic, and can be done online in most places.
Yeah.
But the TEFL certificate's not considered to be as rigorous as the CELTA. The CELTA is what
Which is true.
the Certificate of English Language Teaching of Adults or for Adults, something like that.
Of adults.
Of adults. So it's geared towards older learners.
Yeah.
But it's also a standardized course. Like TEFLs can be any number, it can range from like awesome to like that was the worst amount of money I could have ever spent on something stupid.
My one was a half and half.
Right. The other one, but CELTA is put on by Cambridge.
Yeah.
And then there's the Trinity Certisol, which is not, I don't think it's Oxford, I think it's Trinity College. I can't remember. I remember looking this up one time, but it's sort of the
I don't know.
the equality, the same sort of CELTA. But the CELTA is a standardized, worldwide, recognized. If you come to any school with a CELTA, they look at you and go, "We can talk." TEFL, they're like, "We know you're kind. You probably got that. You printed that off online, or you went to Bangkok." And
well, to be honest, the story of how I got my TEFL was, I just left Serbia and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. My family was struggling financially at the time, so it was moving back to Kuwait and hating my life and thinking, crap, what am I going to do? And at that point, I went back to my school, high school. My school was basically primary school, middle school, and high school all bunched into one. So I went back there because at 16 I got a teacher assistant's job and I liked it. So I went back there thinking, fine, it's a bit of money. So I started being a teacher's assistant and I actually enjoyed it. It was for reception, which basically meant they were 5.5 to 6.5 years old. And the teacher that I was working with, absolutely amazing woman. I loved her to bits. I loved her teaching methodology. I loved how she interacted with the children. Like, she was just great. And that sort of inspired me to think maybe I should go into education. A friend of mine at the time as well did her TEFL and then CELTA and was basically advising me to just do the same until I figure things out. At least it's something that I can have, that I can use, And if it works out, it's great. If it doesn't, then at least I have a job where I'm making some money that can, go towards whatever I choose to do later on. So there was an Italian woman that I was working with at that school at the time, and she was going on holiday with her 2 kids and needed a friend, au pair, to help her out with the kids because the husband wasn't going to be there. So I was like, all right, great. I'll go to Cyprus, get the TEFL done. You fly me from Cyprus to Italy, help you out with your kids, and then come back to Kuwait and work. So that's how I ended up with the TEFL.
So you got an Italian family to pay for your
Yeah,
TEFL
pretty
in
much.
Cyprus. That's pretty neat. But I mean, how much?
And a free holiday in the south of Italy.
Right. Now, I mean, to put that in a sort of economic perspective, it probably wasn't too expensive for the
No,
the
it
TEFL.
wasn't at all.
And then even like the flight from Cyprus to Italy, there's
It
probably
wasn't too expensive.
a daily flight.
Yeah.
I mean, so
I mean, all in
it
all,
sounds
like, I didn't
romantic.
even.
Oh, expensive. But
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
it was like $100.
I mean, I didn't really get paid that much either because
Yeah.
she was a friend and I felt kind of weird getting paid, but she was adamant on paying, and it just made things a little bit clearer. So I was
Yeah.
like, okay, fine, fair enough. So basically, I just mostly got a paid holiday and I covered the TEFL cost.
That's pretty good though, and
Exactly,
she's
it's
helping you
brilliant.
out sort of with
Exactly.
your career development.
So yeah, I going back to the British Council in Kuwait, of course they said, we offer the SALTA here. So
Why didn't you
could
buy
do
it
with
from
us.
us?
Exactly. And I thought, well, that's an idea, but you know what? Your student base will be very homogenous. And
Kuwaitis.
all Arab at least.
Right.
So if not Kuwaiti, then Egyptian or Syrian or Lebanese, which yes, they are slightly different. Well, they are different actually because we speak different dialects of Arabic. So issues with second language acquisition would be different, but it would still be quite similar. So I thought, well, I've got a bit of money. If I'm going to do this, then why not do it in the UK? So
Okay. So you went to the UK.
I went to London, was there for a month. Well, more than a month, because the SALTA was 4 weeks.
4 weeks.
But my older sister lives there.
Oh.
Both my older and my younger sister live in the UK.
Oh,
My younger
fantastic.
sister wasn't there at the time. Or was she? I don't know. If she was, then she was studying in Liverpool, where my older sister lives. So it was go and get the SALTA, go and see family, come back to Kuwait, start working. And yeah, the SALTA is not the TEFL.
It's intense.
The SALTA's intense.
Did you get into any arguments with your tutors?
No, actually, I really enjoyed the school that I did it at. They were very knowledgeable, like very good on giving great advice. There was one teacher in particular, I want to say Russian or Ukrainian background, that just killed with grammar knowledge. Like she savant
Right.
style, like knowledge in
That-
grammar.
That seems
It
to
was-
be any high level person who's speaking or who has studied English as a second language. They all know the grammar terms, and as a native speaker, you're kind of going, I don't know.
Exactly.
I don't know.
Exactly.
I just say the words, and people
I
understand.
studied English old school style. I went to a very traditional, British overseas international school. So yeah, like you just sort of absorb language. I knew 4 tenses basically, and then you start with this, and you're like, holy crap.
I have to explain the
Wow.
present simple, past continuous. I actually studied, prior to going to university, I'd studied Ukrainian and French at my elementary school. We had to. And then,
Wait, your background is
Ukrainian.
Okay.
Right. So, and I grew up with, one of the things that my parents made sure that happened in our childhood was grow up with Ukrainian tradition, Ukrainian culture. In the background, but then since we're in Canada, we had to also learn some of the French language at schools, mandatory, grades 3 to 10. So I was vaguely familiar with the grammatical structures, not as bad as some English teachers who they're like, I don't know. I just go online and look it up on like whatever EnglishGrammar.com, right, or something. But I mean, I'm by no means aware of how English grammar, Latin grammar. Okay, I gotcha. Greek grammar, ancient Greek grammar, can kind of pull that one off because that's what I studied in university. But yeah, teaching English grammar is just like, I don't know, just kind of start speaking.
I walked around that whole time with Michael Swan, like,
yeah,
under my arm. Just, okay, all right, let's do this.
Michael Swan is the author of like 2 of the foremost books in the ESL industry. It's what Practical English Usage, and there's another one that he did that are sort of reference manuals. And if you haven't taken the CELTA, you probably don't know those books. Then you take the CELTA and you're like, where were these books before? You mean everybody explains it, and you mentioned before about the Arabic dialects and how it can be difficult, the second language acquisition. One of the things that people don't understand when you become an English teacher is that you learn how students learn from around the world. And this pops up in language stereotypes. When people make fun of dialects or like the Chinese pronunciation, it's because it's so well known how they learn the language. It is comical, but at the same time, you use that. You go, that's how you teach someone that as a Chinese learner, as a Japanese learner, your tongue has learned how to say the words in your language like this. English requires it like this.
You preempt things. So you kind of cater your lessons towards these issues that you know that are associated with certain nationalities.
And
certain
geographies
language
as well.
and geographies and certain language backgrounds.
Yes.
So yeah, that was. I mean, I'm very happy that I did my CELTA in London because it was a mix. Like, it was, basically walking in and going, oh my god, there's so many different kinds of people.
It is a good introduction to a lot of different people, but I think they select those people very not carefully, because they usually have to take people who are willing to do it. Those students, they basically pay $60 or whatever it is.
So it's basically a course that's made available at a much cheaper price. The same with anything. Like you go to I'm thinking of redoing my internship year, going back to Chinese medicine at the Toronto School of Chinese Medicine, at their clinic, where if you go to their clinic, then you're paying a lot less because you have students that are practicing on you. So the same thing here. The course is made a lot cheaper, and to be honest, I don't know whether there's a selection process or not. We were not told that at all.
But the students are told you're going to be guinea pigs for new teachers. So if you see one of them shake and like almost faint, don't laugh. I think they're prepared for nerves and like. I remember when I was teaching, there were people who were shaking at the whiteboard, the blackboard, whatever it was.
Yeah.
We were using chalk even. We were using chalk.
How long ago was that?
This is like a couple of years, 6 years ago in Montreal, but it was, we were using markers. It was whiteboards.
Yeah,
that's
come
right.
on.
I was using chalk here in China at the universities, but there were people who were shaking so bad, they're like trying to write these words on the board. That was never my issue. My issue was always like, I'll just wing it. You can't wing the CELTA.
You can't
have
win the
to
CELTA
plan
because
everything.
you will get that one question at least once.
Well, and even your tutors will pick you apart and go, well, why didn't you do it this way?
Yeah.
You went over your time, which seems very nitpicky, but that's the whole point of the course. When you enter the course, and this is especially for me, I had a large ego about, because I'd already taught English. I'm like, it's a class. Get them talking,
Same
conversational.
Here. Yeah.
And then it was like, no, there's a standard way of doing that you don't have to use if you don't want, but this is a tried and true, proven method.
It's a template where you use as a skeleton, and once you gain enough experience, then you can add on or take off.
And all classes have the same elements.
Exactly.
You have to, there's the warm up. Hey, how's it going? How's the weather today? What are you guys doing? Did you do anything on the weekend?
It's taking me back.
And then these introductions, like, okay, so I have an example here, and can you tell me what this is? And then you go into your first activity, second activity, and then you review it. I mean, it's not brain rocket science or brain surgery, but there is a template and there's a reason why it works, and the way is basically
Yeah.
spaced repetition of the language, and you target it, which is what students want. To be fair, most people who have learned other languages, because I follow a lot of other polyglots, people who study languages just because they have nothing else to do, or because they just like learning languages. But it all comes down to being able to learn something, space it out, review it, but then most of your learning is not going to be done in the classroom. Not, like most people tell you, it's not what you do in the classroom, it's outside of it.
And this is where I struggle with Chinese medicine.
Right.
Because whatever I'm doing now, it's still restricted to a classroom setting. Whether it was at university or whether it's now in my living room or whether it's online with my study buddy friend. And I know it's limited. I know that it's very limited. So this is why I hope to go to Canada, go back to university, but in this instance, be in a clinic.
Well,
And
are you
practice.
blogging about it? Are you podcasting about your knowledge? Isn't that what people do these days?
Okay, so I could be a teacher, and that does help.
Yeah.
Again, if there's something about that I'm just, there's
It's not
so
for
many
everybody.
different aspects of that I just don't feel comfortable with. I want to practice. That's what I want. I do not want to be on the other side, well, on one side of a microphone, talking to people and telling people about something that I haven't practiced, you know?
I'm just
like,
going to tell you how all it is, and then I'm going to write a
Exactly.
book about it, and then it's like, well, so you
Exactly.
guys,
So I
have
just,
you done any
I
of this?
just, exactly. So I just don't feel that I have enough experience to really say something worth listening to.
A lot of bloggers feel like that when they start out.
Fair
And
enough.
podcasters. But I mean, again, it's not for everybody, and yet you do want to actually use it rather than...
I will do it when I start practicing.
Yeah, when you can start backing it up, like, well, actually, this, because especially if you have real life experience and you can relate it. I mean, that's why the great teachers are the ones that can give you a personal example. It's like,
Exactly.
or tell you, it's like, I know the textbook says this, but this would be a better idea because
Exactly.
in my experience, I've seen this work better,
Exactly.
or more of it.
I mean, at the moment, me and my study buddy friend, have an idea to kind of get ourselves sort of out there, sharing information based on what we have experienced in, and that is us being students
Right.
and studying for board exams. So we do have an idea of building an online resource portal for people who are studying for board exams. So we'll see where that goes.
In China or like around the world?
Well, it's online, so around the world.
Okay.
It will be open to everyone.
Would it be, but studying for board exam? Okay, so but that's like the North American. It
The
would
North
be the
American.
Chinese.
No. It won't be
Is
the
there a
Chinese.
board exam?
There is a board exam, the licensing exam, which
Okay.
is like what I was talking about. I mean, there's an overlap because at the end of the day, there's certain things that you need
Same
to know.
idea. Right. Yeah.
So you could use that to use what we have, what we're hoping to offer. It's still very much in its fetal stage at the
Right.
moment. So yeah, I mean, you would be able to use it to study, hopefully to study for any board exam, that's Chinese medicine
Right.
related. However, yes, the information that we do have is based on the experience of this friend of mine, having done the I'm
Canadian,
gonna
Australian.
butcher. The Australia doesn't actually have a board exam. You sign up for, you join the association
Okay.
and you can practice after that. This is the information that I found online. However, I do not live in Australia, so I don't know the ins and outs. I could be wrong.
What's the association that you have to join?
The Australian, I think
Chinese
it's the,
Medicine Association.
no, I think it's the Australian Acupuncture Association.
Okay.
Again, do not quote me. This was a while back.
But
when I was
that's
looking
what you
at
found so
Australia.
far.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm not entirely sure.
How much
it
is
works.
the yearly or the annual fee for that? Maybe I'll get
I
certified
don't
in
know.
Australia.
I don't remember.
I could put it on my website. Yeah.
No, you need to fill certain criteria.
Oh, okay.
So you need to have gone to school for a certain number of years, and send all the paperwork to this
Ah, right.
association. So yeah, it's not a any Joe and
Type
Jack.
this up.
Exactly. No, you need to try send your transcripts and for them to do the whole recognition process.
Right.
And
Which is a good idea.
yeah.
The verification that you are who you say you are and you know what you did. Sort of
Exactly.
thing.
Exactly.
So with the whole experience problem that you have, that you don't have any, the student visa doesn't allow you to do that. But aren't they changing that now? The student visa requirement, is it the student visa or is it Chinese medicine specific?
It's not a visa issue, it's a license to practice issue. You cannot practice. You cannot poke a needle in anyone,
Right.
and you cannot prescribe. The prescribing of herbs is kind of a bit more lax, let's say, because it's only with certain herbs that you need a doctor's prescription with a stamp
Mm-hmm.
to use to actually get dispensed from a dispensary.
Such as?
The more toxic ones, and of course ephedra.
Okay.
Ephedra, sorry. So yes, for those, and not just those. I learned like a year ago or something. Guizhi, which is cinnamon.
Mm-hmm.
Cinnamon.
It's a different type of cinnamon. Gui pi is like the sticks that you'd buy at the store.
So you have guizhi and you have rogui.
Okay.
Rogui is more the cinnamon bark, and guizhi is more the cinnamon sticks.
Okay.
And for guizhi, because it's very warming, with certain dispensaries, you need a doctor's prescription, which I was very shocked.
What?
Because it's cinnamon.
Wow.
But yeah, so there's one. Well, there's many dispensaries that exist that will give you guizhi, but there's one in particular that I kind of go to get certain prescriptions filled. So that's not really an issue, but with acupuncture, yes, you need a license to legally give someone acupuncture.
That makes sense. I mean, you're sticking needles into people. You kind of want some sort of standardization. Through
Exactly. Which, yeah, I don't have issues with whatsoever, except when you're studying, when you're learning. Again, if you were in the apprentice mentor model, then you'd have the apprentice with you,
Right.
directing your learning and what you're doing and whatnot, so you'd be practicing at some point at least, and maybe not in the beginning, but at some point the mentor would be saying, you need to
Do this.
practice. Exactly.
Yeah,
you
try
need
this.
to practice
You can
so
do
that you can learn.
Yeah.
But in this system, in this model, we don't have that. So that's where the difference is, and that's where the difficulty is of not being able to practice.
Can you apply for that licensing with it overlapping your education, or do you have to finish the education
You need
in
to
order
finish
to
the
do the license?
education. I'm not sure whether. I'm not entirely sure whether you'd be able to apply for it when. I'm not even sure whether they even have it when you're doing your masters and your PhD. I don't know. I do know that there is sort of like a grayish implementing of the rules, because if your relationship with the doctor at the hospital is one of trust, then and a little bit of push, then you can actually get a doctor to first allow you to start removing the needles, and then maybe perform acupuncture. But for the more sort of just more body tonifying. Like you've got Zusanli, which is like really a lot of doctors at that point because it helps not so much invigorate. It helps harmonize the stomach. So in a lot of situations where you're wanting someone to kind of receive, accept certain herbs, as well. Okay, how detailed do I want to go?
Well, I mean, overseas, I mean, in Canada, knowing this or hearing about this, what should people be looking for if they're going to go acupuncture, alternative medicine, Chinese medicine?
What do you mean by looking?
I mean, because you're questioning how detailed. Well, I mean, it is kind of useful to know because if I walk into a place that says alternative medicine, and my chiropractor back in Winnipeg, he was promoting something, I'm just like, I don't think I'm going to do that. I need to research this on Google for at least 3 weeks before I commit to it, sort of thing. But that was because like I went to a chiropractor for bone adjustment, not for getting upsold a different product, which is what can happen in some other private clinics.
Yeah.
So what should people be looking for in that case, and what should they know about these practices?
I get a lot of questions from Westerners wanting to try out Chinese medicine.
Okay, yeah.
Chinese medicine, I mean, you wouldn't go to a Western medicine doctor and say, I want to try out Western medicine.
They look at you go, well, what do you want to try?
Exactly.
Are you talking LSD, or like do you want to learn how to reset a broken bone? I mean, which part do you want to do?
I mean, there's an aspect of Chinese medicine that is kind of forgotten at the moment, but a lot of Chinese medicine or traditional, the traditional sort of Chinese medicine approach to health is preventative.
Okay.
Okay? So, first, it's very difficult to talk in that way now because we don't live that life. A lot of us are overworked, overstressed, over everything. Mm-hmm. That the idea of preventative medicine now is it's a bit difficult to apply in one's life.
I would challenge that in saying that although we are over everything, there are methods and ways that you can still deal with it. Like you can say no, learn how to say no.
Yes.
You can sleep well. You can learn how to get better sleep.
Yes, but my point is that we've kind of caused quite a lot of disharmony in our bodies. Mm-hmm. That anything that we do now is not so much preventative as much as needing to fix first.
Right.
To get back to a clean slate, to then get to preventative measures.
Right.
Is what I'm trying to say. So, as I was saying, there's an aspect of Chinese medicine that's preventative, and that you can say, let's try. Let's try, body cultivation exercises. Yeah. Let's try, nutrition-based therapy. Let's try these things like massage. Yes, that I can say, go try. Yeah. But when it comes to actual diagnosis and then treatment, that's not trying. That's you're going there because you have a specific issue. Mm-hmm. And if you have a specific issue, you sit with a doctor and they use their diagnostic skills, use the theories that we're taught and the structures and the systems, and diagnose what is wrong with you and treat you based on what is wrong with you. So again, you can't just go to a dispensary and say, I'm going to try these herbs. Well, and it doesn't work that way.
In that sense, though, I guess what people would be asking is, like, I've been to a Western doctor. They didn't fix it. I still have this nagging whatever problem. Yeah. Back pain, headache, I feel like shit, whatever. I want to try Chinese medicine. So knowing all of those symptoms, and I know patients are like the worst at this, being honest at what's actually happening with their body, and this is part of being a doctor, is like sussing out what's actually bothering this person, right? So if someone comes in with something like, you know, back pain or foot pain, or it's like I got a pain over here in this side of my body, and then they gave that information to the dispensary, what would they be responding with?
Okay, so you're sitting with a doctor, they're asking you questions. Similar in Western medicine, you're sitting with a doctor, they're asking you questions. The biggest, well, the first issue that I find with patients that know the Western medicine model and then come and sit with a Chinese medical doctor or practitioner in most cases, is that there are certain questions that this model asks that people are not familiar with and people don't pay attention to.
Like what sort of questions?
Like bowel movements, your appetite, sleep.
Well, Western doctors ask those questions.
They
If there's a certain area, like, but they wouldn't ask if your big toe hurts. They wouldn't be asking about poop.
No, but with Chinese medicine,
They'd still ask you about poop.
they would. Not everyone does, and it also depends on the experience of the doctor. With the idea that if a doctor has met 10 people that have a particular ailment, then he's only had experience treating this ailment 10 times.
Yeah.
So the questions he might ask might be quite a lot. But then once he gets to the 1,000th person with that same ailment, with that similar ailment, then he's not having to ask as many questions because he's seen it before. It happens with Western medicine as well. You're quicker to diagnose because you've seen it before. So not every doctor will ask the same questions over and over again, and not every doctor will ask questions that another doctor would ask. And yeah, that comes with experience, and it also comes with the patients as well. Like, Chinese medicine has a little bit more, what can I say?
Personal invasiveness in terms of questioning?
I wouldn't say personal invasiveness.
How's your poop? I mean,
but
what color's your piss? I mean,
it's looking at each person differently because each person is different.
Mm-hmm.
We all are constitutionally different.
Right.
We all have different experiences. We've all had, been exposed to different things in our lives, whether it physically or whether it, it's psychologically, emotionally. Like, all of that affects and influences how a person is put together.
Mm-hmm.
So in accordance to that, a doctor will sit and first observe, and question, and then there'll be, so you've got the observation, the questioning, the palpation, and palpation would be palpating of the body. If it's a musculoskeletal problem, then of course you'll be palpated. But there's also the palpation of the TMI, the blood vessel. So you've got the artery on both the radial artery, on both the right and left side, that a doctor will be palpating to see how the blood and the qi flow in particular parts of the body. There are different points on the artery will reflect, again, different schools say different things, so it can reflect different organ systems, but it can also reflect different levels within the body, and different locations based on the three separations. So you've got the upper jiao, the middle jiao, and the lower jiao, and you have different organ systems, and I stress that it's organ systems because in Chinese medicine we do use the Western organs,
right.
The liver, the heart, the lungs, the kidneys, and the spleen. However, in Chinese medicine, when you say the wu xing, probably butchering the pronunciation. I'm sorry to anyone
The
who
purists are like,
speaks
that's not how you
Chinese.
say that.
It's been a while, and I'm sorry.
What did she say?
So sing, movement, system, process.
So when you say system, what does that refer to?
So
Is there like the liver system, the spleen system, like what we call organ has a system around it, or what does this refer to?
it's not really. So, at least my experience and my understanding of how it is, because for me, having that little Western medicine background, it was a little bit difficult to separate the idea of the actual organs and what they do in Western medicine, and the organs and what they do in Chinese medicine. And it was a struggle.
Right.
It really was a struggle. I went from, trying to separate what each does in reflection to the different systems, to trying to find similarities to what each does in the different systems, to then throw my hands up in the air and go, I can't do this.
No, well,
they're just different. And it's not that they're completely different. They're not, because at the end of the day, the body in Western medicine functions the same way to stay alive.
the body functions.
The
body
body
is.
functions, exactly.
Right.
So
What would be the big difference though? Like the system.
that there's an
For example,
overlap.
the liver. If we were talking about the liver, how would it be treated differently in terms of the Western organ and the
Because
Chinese
it's not
system?
the liver.
Right.
We're not looking at the organ.
Okay.
We're looking at what happens in the system called the liver.
So like go inputs and outputs to the location
No,
of the liver?
forget the physical form.
Okay.
So in Chinese medicine, it's not about the physical form. If anything, there is no, not that there is no physical form, but when we're talking about the liver system, we're not looking at the physical form of the liver. We're looking at the things that happen in the system we call the liver.
Okay.
So that is, okay, I'm not gonna do in Western medicine, this is, no, okay, so in Chinese medicine, the liver houses blood, but it also, is what's the word, trying to translate, so it makes sure that qi movements move in the way that they're supposed to. So those are the two main-ish things that the liver oversees. And again, so because we're talking about that, then it's not the physical form of the liver.
Right.
It's this system that houses blood and makes sure that the qi moves in the directions that it's supposed to move.
So if someone came in or went to a dispensary or went to a Chinese doctor or practitioner, and they'd said, yeah, my other doctor said I have a problem with my liver, but his function, his practice isn't helping me. I want to try Chinese medicine.
So then
What
this
happens
Chinese medicine doctor is asking questions based on what is working well within the construct of Chinese medicine, and what is not acting well within the construct of Chinese medicine. So when you say, like, let's say for example, if I want to be specific, someone comes in and says, I have hepatitis, and I'm having complications, and I need treatment. Or I've tried the gene therapy for hepatitis C. I've tried all the different sorts of therapies, and I still have hepatitis, and I want to get rid of it. Whereas with Chinese medicine, it's not looking at hepatitis. This is really bad.
It's
example.
a very extreme
I know,
example.
exactly. Sorry.
But I was actually thinking about asking, well, what about like addressing things like AIDS, HIV, or even cancer, like moving into that sort of.
So you're looking at the symptoms, the signs and the symptoms, and then going backwards, you're then assigning them a Chinese medicine disharmony.
Right.
And then you're treating the symptoms to treat the disharmony. So this is the the biao to treat the ben, but there's also the ben to treat the biao, which the ben being the root cause of the symptoms that are happening. But it's understanding as well, okay, so what is in excess, what is deficient, what is hot, what is cold, what is yin, what is yang, in its roots, so that you can get rid of the signs and symptoms.
Would all these the categories that you just gave, could those be similar to what Western medicine calls them different names, like mitochondria, amino acids, magnesium deficiency sort of thing? Like, is there ever that sort of overlap where you say this word but we refer to it as this?
And that's where it stops being traditional Chinese medicine and starts being Chinese medicine.
Okay.
Because yes, you do have, especially in the integrated hospitals, especially in the new books that are mostly, well, I wouldn't say mostly, because they were also in the books, like when we were studying internal medicine at the university. So it's half the book started off with the Chinese medicine systems and disharmonies and methodology, and then the other half was, okay, and now we're looking at bronchitis and la 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 la, and all of these Western terms of diseases. But then within that, it's like, okay, you have different different reasons for why you have bronchitis. So it could be that you have a disharmony of the lungs of some sort. Don't really want to go into specifics because
it's very personal in that sense. Whereas Western medicine would blanket approach bronchitis, this go.
Yeah.
Whereas Chinese medicine is like, well, we got to figure out all
Exactly.
these other things. It's much more invasive, personally invasive, in the sense that it's asking you more direct questions and coming up with a profile of you as a person.
I heard this before and I cannot remember, so I cannot quote it. But yeah, I found I had an aha moment listening to this. It was this person said, with Western medicine, what you try to do in treatment is you kind of carpet bomb the problem.
Yeah.
You go in there, you're not entirely sure, well, not that you're not entirely sure, you have a general idea based on research that's done. I mean, don't get me wrong, I am all for Western medicine. I'm all for all forms of medicine, as long as you are able to put it together and make it work for the person.
Mm-hmm.
With as little damage as you can, because you know what? We can do that now. We can take the time to try and save more than we hurt.
Yeah.
Where the issues that I have with using one form of medicine sticking to one form of medicine rather than incorporating all different methods, is that sometimes you are met with a situation where that one method is not exactly the best way.
Okay.
So, yes, with Western medicine, you have great medicines that have come out, you have great treatment protocols that have come out. However, yes, if I'm going to bitch about it a little bit, then yeah, it doesn't take into account of trying, it's, okay, I take that back. This is really difficult, because I know that they're making strides in things, with particular therapies where, especially with cancer research and things like that, where they are looking at the specifics of the microclimate that.
Yeah, they're ripping apart genes to figure out cancer.
Exactly.
Which you don't hear about being done in traditional Chinese medicine,
No,
and not even
you
in
don't.
the textbooks from the ancient times.
No, you don't. So yes, there is that interest in getting to the specificity of certain situations to treat certain situations. But what's a general practice is not so much that. Whereas with Chinese medicine, in the methodology, there's more interest in looking at more specifics to try and treat the specifics. So this is where both can be good at this. Using both at the same time can be good.
What do you mean taking the specifics to treat the specifics? Or
what I mean is that
way?
when you using your term of invasive questioning, it's because you're trying to get specific. You're trying to get to the bend. You're trying to get to the root. What is the root situation? And if you have a doctor that will take it even that step further, what is the root cause? By looking at your history, your constitution, where you came from, the emotional baggage that you carry, blah 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 blah, getting to using all of that to get to a very specific and tailored treatment for you.
Right.
It's not going to be the same treatment for someone else.
No, so it's much more personal.
Yes, you do have formulas that are basis, but then you're adding and subtracting all the time. Most doctors will not prescribe the standard formula that you get taught at university because we're not the same.
So is this why whenever I have a sore throat and I go to the pharmacy, they give me 8 boxes of various things, and I go, I don't know what any of this does.
That I don't know.
Let's start popping pills.
But that I don't know.
Can I drink with these?
But that I know that certain doctors also have qualms about that because they're over-the-counter medication, and they are the formulas, the standard formulas that come out of the book.
Right.
So yeah, carpet bomb. You have a sore throat, we're going to carpet bomb you with this, and hopefully you'll treat it.
Well, even
most probably
some
it'll
of these
treat it.
hospitals, I think it's also a budgetary concern. Especially the international ones. When you go to an international clinic, they just see dollar signs because it's all paid for. Whether or not you're paying for it or the company's paying for it, someone's paying for it, and they just load you up with all those pills just so. Because the doctors don't get paid very much.
If it comes with, and this is where I might be a little bit drastic, but if it comes in a pill form, then it's not tailored.
Right.
If they sit and make the pills for you, which we did learn how to do at university,
that's neat.
Then that's tailored. But if it comes in a nice little bottle and it's all like, it's not tailored.
Why can't it be a purified form of something that would be used in a tailored
Because
production?
as I said, each formula has a base, but then you're adding and subtracting specific herbs that do specific things for that specific presentation of disease in that specific person.
Are you saying that even the pill, like if it's like I'm taking fish oil right now?
Yeah.
I do it. I take 2 pills every morning, which one of our colleagues says there's no scientific proof that it works, and I go, well, it seems to work for me, so I'm okay. And the only reason I'm taking it is for brain cognition, like clarity.
Yeah.
And it seems to help. The other thing is coconut oil.
Yeah.
MCT oil is the other one, but coconut oil in general. So you're saying that the fish oil capsule that I would take hasn't been made tailored for me. It's been generically made just from whatever it is. How could they change fish oil? I mean, how would you tailor fish oil?
We were talking about Chinese herbs.
Okay, so
we were talking about Chinese herbal formulas. Which Chinese herbal formulas
where does this change?
Are 99.9% never one herb.
So it's a combination of
It's
things.
a combination of herbs. And this combination has different actions in the body.
Would it almost be this, when you say that, I'm thinking that in terms of fish oil, because I know a lot of farmers as well, beer, this beer, we know it as being made from hops and from barley, but we don't know where each ingredient is from.
Okay.
You're saying that even one pill would be a combination of everything that's been tailored for your body, whereas the fish oil or even the beer, we have no idea exactly where every part has been sourced from.
No, I didn't.
Okay. I'm going off here. What is fish oil? Is fish oil this type of fish from this type of place, or is fish oil like this?
Well, you can go into that. There is the idea that you have a difference between farmed, because fish oil,
And this is just an example. This is me trying to bridge the understanding here.
if you want to get specific, then yeah, you can question the quality.
Yeah.
Quality.
Which
of
even
fish
people
oil.
do anyway of fish
Exactly.
oil and anything.
Based on whether it's farm fish, whether it's what's the word I'm looking for, wild fish. Thank
Right.
you. Which part of the world it came from, levels of mercury in the Lincoln water,
Yeah.
blah, 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 so there's a lot that you can question, that then makes you question the efficacy based on the quality.
Right.
Which with Chinese medicine, that's an issue as well, but what I'm talking about is different to that. There is an issue of quality here.
Mm-hmm.
That's a
It's a
whole
different
other
right.
conversation. But what I'm talking about is how different herbs interact with each other, and how they interact with each other can be modified to suit any one person's specific ailment.
So with TCM, would they ever give you one pill that's a combination tailored for you, or would they give you?
They make it.
Right,
Yes.
right, but they
But
wouldn't.
you can never. The thing is, okay, if as with your situation, you went to the pharmacy and they gave you 8 different packets.
Yeah, it was comical. I have a sore throat. My mom would say, drink hot water and.
Well, they tell you to drink hot water here.
Vitamin
This is
C.
the country of
Get
drinking
rest
hot
and
water.
stop talking so much. There's your. You don't
Yeah.
need 8 packages of pills.
So if we take this specific example, then if I want to, as a practitioner, how can I explain? So each of these 8 pills are specific formulas
Right.
that have specific herbs. In pill 1, you've got 5 herbs. In pill 2, you've got 3 herbs. In pill 3, you've got 10 herbs.
Right.
My formula, I probably want one herb from there, 3 herbs from there, 4 herbs from there.
Okay.
So yeah, carpet bomb you. You've
With
got
the
all the
idea
herbs
that-
that I would use.
Out of the 10, at least 4 are
Exactly.
necessary.
Exactly.
Okay.
But then adding on top would be the herbs that are also causing different actions or causing different interactions between
It could actually have a negative effect.
It can have a negative effect. It can have no effect. It can cause
Other stuff.
other things.
Side
So
effects
from
of
that,
some
exactly.
sort,
So I mean, the idea that Chinese medicine doesn't have side effects, that's stupid.
Right.
Because of course it does. Everything has side effects. So yeah, I don't. It's not that I don't believe that people should use over-the-counter medication. Of course not. You have a sore throat, you're stuck in the middle of nowhere or whatever, you can't see a doctor, yada yada, you go to the pharmacy and you get medication. Whatever helps, use it.
Yeah.
But if you are in a situation where you can find help that helps you more than harms you, then take it. Why would you want to cause more harm when you don't have to?
But with that, are any of those pills ever pure? You mentioned the 10 herbs in one, but you only need 4. Do they ever make just the one herb pill, sort of as a concentrated form of it? So you could instead of having one big pill, you have 10 little pills that you kind of take 2 of these, 2 of these. I mean, it's still pill form, but it's pure.
Not that I know.
Okay.
I don't.
They haven't
know.
gone to that level yet.
I'm not saying that they haven't. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they have.
My problem with taking anything in pill form is that, and I've told other people about this, I'm very untrusting or distrusting of anything going, well, if it's in pill form, first of all, it's not just quality, but it's the packaging, and not just the environmental. Okay, it's the actual packaging of the pill. What's going on with it? Why is it preserved? I mean, that's where I go in terms of, I don't want to be taking pills if I don't have to. That's always been a very, I don't know, I've always just thought of it, I don't like your preservatives. Maybe it's not an issue, I mean, maybe it is an issue. I mean, with the fish oil, I think they use vitamin E oil to coat, to make the actual enclosure, but then it's like, well, where'd you get the vitamin E oil from? And, Was it? Is it this? Is it that?
Yeah, there's a
I mean,
lot of
and
questioning that.
where do you end? Where do you stop that sort of questioning at all? I mean, it's even with the mask argument today. You were wearing a mask and I wasn't at the store. I'm going. I just rode a public bicycle around the room or around the block, and I'm pretty sure and I've touched all these products, and I know that the people here in this store aren't wearing masks, and I don't know where the toilet is in this place either, so I'm just kind of wondering.
I don't think there is a toilet.
I thought I never wanted to. I think there is actually one in the back storage area. I'm pretty sure there is, but whether or not they are always washing their hands, just given my experience with seeing other people leave the washroom after their business, I go, the mask isn't the only issue. I mean, there's a certain acceptance of risk that you have to take when you do any of these sorts of things. But
I mean, my biggest advice in that case is nutrition. Like, but then you're asking questions there. But it's a lot easier to sort of follow the trail to its source when it comes to food.
Right. So this is something that no one else, I mean, very few people have talked about with this whole COVID outbreak, is that everyone's talking about wear a mask, do this, stay aside, stay away from everybody else. No one's saying eat your vegetables, do your exercises, don't just sit around watching TV and drinking, cola or beer or eating sweet popcorn all the time. Do something.
Exactly.
Read a book that exercises your brain.
System
active. Keep going. I mean, don't just take this as a time to binge watch Netflix for the next 3 weeks. I mean, no one was talking about that.
I wouldn't say no one.
All the big health guys, not just the health, the government sources, and I'm not just pointing at China, I'm pointing around the world. Yeah. None of them are saying, you know what, just take care of yourselves, take care of your health.
It's not something that the world of medicine deems important enough.
Well, it seems it should be like common sense.
It should be, but people who are making money can't make money if you tell people to just prevent themselves from getting sick by leading a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for them. So.
But even with the people who are trying to, they might not have been educated. They just not know. Well, what do you mean by keep yourself healthy? I mean, in what way? I don't know how to do.
I know, but we live in an era where people get told a lot of things that in the past you would know these things because you spend time with. It's sort of taught down through the generations, you sat with your grandmother and she'd tell you, I have memories of these conversations with my grandmother, like folk medicine, things that you should do in certain situations, things that you shouldn't do, how to be healthy basically, that now these conversations pretty much don't really exist.
We have the internet now. We have Google. Mother Internet solves all of our problems now.
Except it kind of...
Siri, I don't have any voice activation. It's all off. My cameras aren't taped, but the voice activation, anything that requires it, no. If they're listening in, again, there's probably a microphone at the big tower across the street that's beaming in. Or they're just watching listening to my podcast. Oh, is that what he's doing?
Yes, okay. It's okay. We don't need to police him.
Not at all. It's all out there anyway. But in terms of the whole health argument, and it's actually kind of neat that we do work with quite a few people who are very into it. Does Chinese medicine at all sort of, because you're talking about bringing it back to the preventative, and I kind of want to ask you, when does it become an issue? Because you mentioned that we're overworked, we're over everything, and is there a time in our life when we can actually stop that from happening? From ever having that issue of having to work backwards? Is it possible?
I don't have the experience. I'm not a person who meditates every day. I'm not a person who does body cultivation practices every day. I'm not that person. and I haven't done it for years on end, so I cannot tell you that. The only thing that I can say is based on theories, and based on discussions that I've had with certain people. One of the ideas of the body cultivation exercises is the building of awareness of the body.
Mm-hmm.
And building it so much so that you have this heightened sensitivity towards certain functionings within your body. So, again, not from my own experience. Although I have played with certain things over the years, and I can say that yes, there were certain situations where I was able to feel specific things. And I'm not talking about feeling chi or feeling whatever, although maybe that's what it is. I don't know.
What is feeling chi for people?
I don't know. It's a very subjective experience for people. At least from my perspective, like I've never seen anyone manipulate chi where they've flown across a room, or
Right.
like how in the Chinese, the old kung fu Chinese movies, like
they're modern. They're still doing that these days. They're flying off of
yeah,
buildings.
exactly. So no,
But would it be like a state of being, a state of essence?
Well, the one real answer that I understood was from a qigong teacher at the university, who was the only person, or the first person, let's say, at the university where he was able to give an honest answer that wasn't this esoteric,
Right.
Mishmash of things that I felt were given to us as international students. We were either given these esoteric answers that were very difficult to connect to, or in difficult situations when we asked the difficult questions, just to be specific. So
Right.
There were situations where we asked questions or we got answers. But the difficult questions, a lot of the times it was either the esoteric answer that we could not connect to, or the you just don't understand because you're not Chinese.
Ah, yes, that answer.
Yes.
You gotta love that answer, but you just don't know because you got.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know if that one washes anymore.
So, I'm trying to remember now the question that I asked, but it was somewhere along the lines of, speaking to different people about their idea of what chi is, and in their practice, and what I mean by that is the Dao Yin practice, the body cultivation practices. So all the qigongs, the tai chi, the bailanjin, the bagua, and of course all the different schools. These are 4 out of
Are there a lot of
quite a few.
Really? Oh.
I mean, I don't know how many, but there are quite a few. So, out of all these different practices, people have different feelings and different interpretations of the movement of chi in their body. So, me sitting here with you, practicing your form of qigong, because even within the different practices, you have lineages.
Okay.
Trying to be very specific with the terminology here, because Western medicine terms don't really reflect what is the actual practice here. So even within the different lineages, you have different lineages, so that each one is slightly different and follows either a slightly different physical form in physical practice, or philosophy.
What would they agree on though? Because you're saying there's all these lineages and separations.
So,
it almost sounds like no one agrees on what this thing is.
It's not so much. no, it's not so much that they don't agree. You do have ones that disagree with each other, but you have ones that it's just a different way of doing something. The same way that you would have in anything. You know, let's say painters. Yes, you have different schools of paintings, of art, and different methods of painting. You know, the Renaissance period, all the different ways that someone can create a piece of art.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say that one way of creating a piece of art is against the other one, and saying that no, the way that you do it is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
This is an art form, in a way of practicing something, basically. So it was sitting with this lecturer and saying, okay, so you have all these differences. You have all these different ways of doing things, that then lead you to have a different experience in your own body. So how am I to know what's right and what's wrong and what's real and what's not real?
So what does qi refer to? Like, because obviously it's not going to refer to like your fingernails. I mean, it does, but when you're talking about qi, you're not referring to like a sickness or anything. You're referring to a different type of.
Qi actually has many meanings.
Okay. What would be the biggest one?
The biggest one is movement.
Okay.
And this is the biggest one that I find and that has been taught to me, that the Western mind can understand. So it's movement within the body. Now, the idea of using the word energy,
okay.
That's been killed to death. Let me just say. And it's just like, it became such a fad, and like, you know,
right.
all these, and I say this with love, because I was a you know, happy tree hugging hippie, you know, in my 20s as well. But there's a certain type that use it in such a negative sort of way. It became negative, exactly. Yeah. It's just this like airy fairy, the energy, which it is that, but then when you call it movement, then you need energy to move.
Yes.
So it's movement.
The question that popped into my mind is that, so when you mention this movement, is it like the physical act of moving your finger, or is it the energy, or is it the things around it? Like
it's
the actual,
all of it.
So it's all of it. It's all encompassing.
It's all encompassing.
It's the very essence of movement itself. Which, I mean, it goes across religions. Yeah. Religions have all sorts of explanations. Even modern science is coming up. It's like, oh yeah, no, I mean, movement is movement. You know, yeah. You're like, well, but what do you?
Conscious, unconscious,
yeah.
Like all of it, and it all takes energy. At some point in my Western stuck mind, I was like, oh, could it be ATP? Is it ATP? Because that's like the unit of like, you know, well, that's the unit of energy. It's one of the units of energy, if not the unit of energy that's used in the body, that moves everything.
Right.
So could it be that? Could it be metabolism? Could it be? So yeah, dropped all that. It's just
movement.
And I don't want to say just, because it isn't. Yeah, as I said, it's a few things.
What character do they use? The Chinese character, what is it? I mean, does that
the traditional one?
Was there ever? Did they still use the traditional one, or they changed it to the?
No, they removed. It used to have a ni underneath the qi.
Has that changed the definition at all?
God, I'm gonna have to pluck all this.
That's a good thing to ask the Chinese colleagues. Like, so when you refer to qi, do you remember? Are you referring to the traditional or the simplified character of the qi, the movement?
No, nobody uses the traditional.
Right.
Anymore.
So it's all simplified then.
So okay, so if you pleco it, it's gas, air, breath, weather, smell. Well, no. That's xiangqi, qianqi. Okay, no, I go back.
Qi. So the simplified one's like the I want to say the Ren character on top of the line, and then there's like the backwards fei.
Yeah.
Which
And
is not the backwards
no,
phase, it's backwards guam.
and the traditional one would have a mi underneath. So
Like for rice?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's kind of like the rice under the air under, and people are over top of everything.
Yeah.
Is it the Ren radical on top? Or no, I got that wrong. Someone's screaming at me now listening to my podcast going,
seriously.
your Chinese is terrible.
This is what happens when you don't practice.
But I know the character you're talking about. So she refers to tianqi, like the weather.
Yeah.
Or and things like that where it refers to sort of it does mean gas because like there's was it 水气 is humidity, I believe. Which is like water air.
血气.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's
The
like
moist
humidity, moist air.
air,
And you're
yeah.
like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it does refer to that sort of ethereal
Yeah.
being of gas, or it's not of solid form. The ancient Greeks had a form of it as well, and I can't remember the word was, like ether or something like that. Ether.
Yeah.
And they had, I mean, Plato and Aristotle and all the sophists had their own version of what ether was.
Yeah.
And
that, yeah, like you can somewhat say it's similar in this case. Although
I believe
at this
Catholicism
point,
just calls it the Holy Ghost, the breath of God. I don't know what it is.
huh? Interesting. Yeah, I never.
Well, you get into that
I
argument,
never
and
really.
the Holy
Okay.
Ghost is like the movement, but like God,
Yeah.
the Son, and like Jesus, and then the Holy Ghost are all one in being undivided, which is what the Catholic Mass or the Christian Mass goes through. This has been one of my grand unifying theories. I swear I'm going to be that old man in the nursing home pontificating this. Well, actually, this is all connected, and we're all connected as one. And it's all going to be like, well, the nutrition, the philosophical belief, the words. I actually have this image of if there is a God, that he would do nothing other than either be silent or laugh, because it would
Or
all
breathe breaths of air
Well,
into people.
because
Well,
he would just be like, I know everything, I've experienced it all,
yeah.
and it's all funny because I know how it's going to turn out, but I understand your point of how it's not turning out for
Yeah.
you, which is funny because if you give it time, it will, and even if it doesn't for you, in the grand scheme of things, it does.
Yeah.
Or he's just like, that's a good idea. I never thought that my creation would do that to me. Interesting. that this is what I do during day job.
Right, instead of actually listening. Anyway.
Why? There's a reference.
So going back to this lecture, so I asked my question and he turned around and said, well, are you trying to ask whether the experience of chi is subjective or not? I was like, yes. And he went, yes, it is. And I was like, yeah, but then, no, wait, but then how do I know that it's real? And he's like, is it real for you?
Right.
And I said, well, yeah. And then he said, well, then what's the problem?
But even answers like that, though, sometimes those are aggravating because you're like, can you give me an answer that I can understand?
No, the thing is, okay, so I understood it to a certain level, and that shut me up.
Mm-hmm.
But then the more you practice, and I put that, and I say that like that because, again, my practice is mama who.
But you have experience. You've studied it.
I have days and times where I really delve into it, and then life takes over, and then I lose it. But yes, what I have experienced and what I have come to understand through my experience is that my experience of the world is subjective.
Yes.
So if I learn how to interpret my subjective experience,
Right.
then I can use it.
Yeah. Sort of appreciate being, just being.
No, not so much appreciate being in the practitioner state.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean my question was also questioning how when
They're not answering.
okay.
That's not my door. That's the neighbor's door. Again, the 3 people living there may or may not be legally. I don't know anymore.
Okay.
I think it's legal now.
So when we observe, when we palpate, especially when we're palpating blood vessels, all of that is connected to chi and blood. So how do I know that my interpretation of this person's chi is just not me making shit up in my head? Because it's subjective.
Yeah.
So his answer for me was that yes, it is subjective, but it's through the practice, it's understanding, through also separating from, treating different people, that yes, when it comes to this person, when it comes to this this type of person, when it comes to this type of disease, when it comes to this type of symptoms, this is what I feel.
Right.
And the more I feel, the more information I have, and the more I can associate, disassociate, group together, ungroup, to figure out that, oh, okay, so in this situation, this is how it feels for me.
Right.
So yeah, that honestly was the biggest teaching that I got that year. That has also been the foundation of how I view the idea of chi.
It sounds like it was almost like permission, like
I guess.
or like an acknowledgement. Yes, it's like you're asking a question. Well, yes, it does, because you're there. I'm there. You've asked the question. You're aware of it.
Yeah.
You have permission to understand that
and
it is.
Explore.
Yeah.
And explore, and not sit there questioning every step with the idea that, oh, but then it's just me, and if it's just me, I could be crazy. I could be.
Right.
I could
maybe not permission, confirmation.
Both.
Where it's kind of like,
both.
You've asked the question. I understand. Yes. Now, can you define it in any one way? Good luck. Probably not. But yes, you can also, because everyone.
Because it's yours.
It's subjective.
Yeah.
Do people who don't study in China get the same sort of education?
I don't know.
Okay.
So going back to the positives and the negatives.
Right.
So I went over the negatives of I touched the negatives of having studied at that university, but honestly, my biggest takeaway from this experience was the fact that I was in China studying it. To be exposed, not to the culture or whatever, but if I'm looking at Chinese medicine, to be exposed to the possibilities that exist here within Chinese medicine, within the idea of integrating Chinese medicine with other disciplines of medicine, all of that, I would not have been able to have that in the West.
Why not? What's missing?
What's missing is that here you have a clinic on every corner, you have hospitals, like
actual TCM
that
medicine,
exactly,
right?
where you have different departments, you have, you don't get that in the West.
There's more variety here as well, because you were mentioning all these different schools, these lineages.
Exactly.
And you're exposed to that, whereas in a Western university or a clinic, you might be exposed to one.
Yeah, when it comes to the actual medicine, yes. When it comes to other things like the cultivation, the nutrition and things like more preventative, I don't know, because hearing from foreign students who are studying here, they came with the background of having studied some form of Chinese martial arts before coming here.
Oh, okay.
And that was a stepping stone for them to get into China, to form an interest in Chinese medicine. So
you went the academic medical route, and other people went through kung
fu. Yeah. I struggled in the
There's
beginning.
a pair of nunchucks over there. I was practicing them. I watched these YouTube videos, guys, talking about the chi and stuff like that. I'm going, yeah, it's interesting. Let's just do karate stuff instead.
How many times did you smack yourself in the head?
I kept on banging my elbow, so I actually, because I bought this one pair of nunchucks from my university, used stuff, right? Too quiet. And I was using it here. You can't see them. You probably can. There's dings on the floor all over the place. And I'm like, okay, I shouldn't do that anymore. And I hit my elbow a couple times right there on the bone. I'm like, nope, jing dong, rubber, padded nunchucks. That was a lot easier to deal with. So
it's funny you say that. Actually, my stepfather ex-stepfather, was a martial artist. Can you say that? Martial arts practitioner.
Does it ever end?
Whatever, I don't know. But he studied Japanese martial arts. So I grew up learning and practicing Shotokan karate.
Okay.
I did that until I was 16.
So you do have a martial arts background. Not Chinese kung fu.
16 really, so I can't really say that I have
It
a
counts.
background.
Hey,
Fair enough.
people say
Fair
that you can't learn a language after age of 12. So
I mean, there's still things that I do remember. There's still like certain forms that I do remember, the katas. But yeah, after 16, I kind of lost interest.
kind of like my French. Kind of like most Canadians' French. Yeah, if I don't have to do it anymore, it's kind of...
Precisely, exactly. I did realize at some points as well, around about that age, is like, okay, wait, we were practicing because you didn't have a babysitter.
Well, but
we just needed to make sure we weren't killing each other. No,
but that's productive use of time.
Exactly. And then when teenage years, didn't need to be there because I didn't need to be looked after so much.
Yeah.
So stopped going.
There was my family. We didn't do martial arts. That wasn't our. It was Ukrainian culture. It was a lot of family get-togethers, but and Ukrainian dancing. I was actually a Ukrainian dancer up until like 22, 23.
Is that with the ribbons?
Well,
No.
the girls had the ribbons.
Okay.
The men generally did not have the ribbons. We weren't even given swords or anything. There are male dances with weapons involved. Because Ukrainian dancing is actually an honorific, a heritage, a cultural homage to old fighting techniques that the Kozakh had back in Ukraine, and the Russians. Like
Okay.
a lot of people know the Cossacks as being Russian, but the Ukrainians also had soldiers, the Kozakh, and their sech is in their base camp is in Zaporizhia in Ukraine, which is just north of the Donbass area. So the current Ukrainian war that's going on between Russia and Ukraine, there's an island just north of that, and that's where the Cossacks had their base camp.
Okay.
But yeah, Ukrainian dancing, I mean, it's highly ornate and very colorful, but all of the ornaments, the clothing, the patterns, all have historical roots. And it's like I remember one time showing up to a dance concert, and one guy had like 3 or 4 different shirts, and I had my one. He's like, "Yeah, you have the wrong embroidery." I'm like, "Fuck, it's all the same, isn't it?" He's like, "Well, no, that's this province, and we're doing a dance from this province." I'm like, well, my mom bought this one, so we're using this one. That's it.
Nice.
But I mean, they all have sort of historical precedent in,
Yeah.
in that way. But yeah, I was a Ukrainian dancer for years, and then that stopped. I can't do this.
At 16.
I am trying to do the splits again. My question to myself was, as I get
You
older,
could do the splits?
in the air. Yeah, there's a picture in my high school of me doing the splits in the air. When I say split, because I guess, my legs were fully splayed.
Yeah.
I could basically do the splits. I couldn't do them doing the looking forward, but sideways. I was.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was pretty far down the ground. I can't go that far anymore. I know
Okay.
that, and I think that's one of the issues with my hip that I have these days that I'm stretching out. That all sort of ended early 20s, and my body that's when I started working in an office, and that became modern office pain very, very, very quickly.
Yeah.
But we had no nutrition, like there was no, in Ukrainian dancing, there was no chi, there was no, there was religion, like God, Catholicism, because Ukraine's basically a devoutly Catholic, Orthodox country. But, and that was Sunday morning. Friday night was Ukrainian dancing, Saturday morning was Ukrainian school, and then Sunday morning was going to Mass, to liturgy, all in Ukrainian, where we were altar boys as well, so we helped out the priest and everything.
Wow.
So there was a whole, it's interesting when I travel now and I meet people who do come to China and they're enamored with the culture. I go, did you have any culture when you grew up? And it's...
I think culture differs.
A lot of them are Americans, not gonna lie, and they didn't have the same cultural exposure that I had growing up. And
Yeah.
this is something I never really appreciated of my parents until basically I started traveling and meeting some of the people, usually in a bar, where they're kind of talking about, oh man, this culture is just so much better. I'm like, well, you know, it's just different. I think it's a little bit different. I mean, there's good things, there's bad things,
Yeah.
and at least they have craft beer, so I can deal with things. You know, and the internet's fast, so I can look up things.
Fast.
Ish. And we're getting into the time of the year when
Why?
it might
Are
get
you
slower.
comparing it to Canadian internet?
Well,
Because we need to talk. I can't move to a country that has worse internet than here.
which we need to talk about that you are in the process of moving to Canada.
In the
Ish.
process, yes.
Right, but you've been COVID has put everything off. Understandable.
No,
but
actually, the timeline has still been the same. It's just that now, after COVID, my
relocation
my
plans.
route
Okay.
of relocation is different. How I'm gonna get there, and for what reason? Well, not so much for what reason, but yeah, how I'm going to stay there is different.
What way?
Well, before I was planning on just applying for immigration from here,
Mm-hmm.
whereas now I want to go back to university, do a year
Okay.
if I can, because at the moment there's a bit, like I need to finalize my admissions, and then we being me and the university need to sit and talk, because I've actually received the highest level of education in Chinese medicine here in China, so there's nothing more that they can do for me in Canada. So, because I did think of doing, because I know that 5 years is considered a bachelor's plus master's in a lot of countries. So I was thinking, all right, maybe I could just go straight and do a PhD.
Yeah.
Which that would have been okay to do in the US, but then I contacted universities in Canada and they're like, why would no?
Bravo, Canada.
What do you mean?
Good job, Canada.
It's like you're already there. There's no more. You've done 5 years. That's what we got.
So in the States, you would have like a master's degree according to their
Yeah.
education system, and you can.
And the UK.
So then Canada's saying what?
Canada's saying
there's no
at
PhD.
the moment, it's the way it is in Canada is that you. I can't remember the acronyms now. So you're either a practitioner, and I could be wrong. I am very sorry. You can either be a practitioner of Chinese medicine or acupuncture, or you're a doctor of Chinese medicine or acupuncture. And what I have is the doctor level.
Okay.
It's not a doctorate.
It's a doctor.
It's just a doctor. So I've already done the 5 years. So what I'm trying to do...
Check.
Yeah, exactly. So what I'm trying to do, because I haven't had the practice since 2017, is to... Because what's different in Canada is that you have the 1 year... Well, you have an option. So it's 1 year or less of practice, observership, then internship in the school's clinic. Where you're actually practicing because you have a student's license.
Right.
And you have a mentor, an advisor, or whatever term you want to give that person that helps with your learning. So I would like that. But because I've already graduated with the highest level, then me going back is a bit of a meh.
It sounds like it more like just be sort of like for ceremonial purposes, going through the motions.
No, they did offer before, when I was speaking to them, they did offer a course, like a short course.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want a short course.
Right.
I want an internship.
Yeah.
So it's basically trying to figure out whether that's possible or not.
So instead of going to Canada, why don't you just stay in China and do the licensing? Do it here?
Because then that would give me a license to practice here. Every country has a different... requires for you to be licensed in that country. So,
but you don't want to stay in China
no, I don't want to stay in
longer.
China. No, I don't want to
What's
stay in
pushing
China.
you out? Can I ask?
I've been here 9 years. I've been here 9
Any
years.
other reasons? I mean, or is it just the 9 years? Because I've heard this. There's only one other person I've heard it from who said, I don't want to be one of those expats that has basically passed their expiry date. But I don't meet too many people who are like that here in China. It seems that they'll just sort of have a 7 years seems to be a good jumping off point. And then it's like the next jump is like 15. You're close.
China, I feel, for foreigners, unless you marry into the culture.
Even okay.
And even then, no, when you marry into the culture, then there's a certain level of integration.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that you're given a green card. You're given an option of a green
Right. Yeah. You're not automatically.
Exactly.
You still have to apply for it.
And you still need to get approved.
And talk about paperwork. It's not
Exactly.
online. It's you got to go ahead
Exactly.
and write it all out.
So, I don't want to live in a country where I'm constantly an outsider. There is no hiding this. There is no integrating this. I cannot walk out into the street and go, yeah, I'm one of you. This is not Chinese. It's never gonna be Chinese.
My favorite thing to do with the some of the people, the latest one that happened was one of the Kwaiti guys. He's like, like, where'd you come from? I'm like, 我是北京人. I'm China. I'm Beijing. He's like, 不是拿过来. I'm like, I'm Beijing. I'm speaking Chinese. I am one of you. He's like, I'm not Beijing. I'm like, I know your accent.
I know.
But I never did answer because I'm like, well, I mean, and that is the sad truth of being here in China. Are there any countries that actually let you immigrate? I think Singapore lets you immigrate.
But Singapore's another place where
You're right.
There's.
This is that conversation's more about like immigration and non-immigration and like because Japan has the same thing.
Yeah.
Korea, they don't. There's no immigration. There's no. Whereas Canada and like that whole debacle that surrounded like the Mexicans going across the border in the United States. It's like at least the States accepts this. Like you can immigrate. There are countries in the world that don't allow.
My country doesn't allow immigration.
You can't ever become those people.
No.
It's just not.
Why
not
would
possible.
I want to live in a place, contribute to a place, to interact with its people if I'm constantly going to be met with
But where are you from?
Exactly.
Yeah.
To an extent.
Yeah.
I mean, what I liked about Canada was because I mean again I say my sisters live in the UK and it makes more sense for me to go and stay to move to the UK. However, that's also becoming a bit of a difficulty at the moment. Europe is inundated with applications. I mean, it's understandable, and I admire Europe, Europe's opening its borders to asylum seekers, to people in need, basically.
It's pissing off a lot of Europeans, though.
Yes, it is.
And you can see it.
That's a conversation.
It's happening. You can see it on social media, but it's also that was the same argument with the United States and then even Canada. There's a few people who argue about letting in foreigners and then they take the jobs or whatever. Going well, but Canada has a very selective immigration policy.
Yes,
there's a quota for asylum seekers, but you don't want to apply as asylum seeker. At least most people don't. You want to apply as an immigrant because it's a very different route. I'm not sure of it exactly, but I know that Canada, it's not like people just wash up on shore.
No, you can't.
It's
ways away.
It's not a country that is going to happen.
You can't swim there or fall off a boat.
I mean, maybe is there a boat that lands in Vancouver Port or Montreal? Maybe there's a secret boat that goes across. I don't know.
But it's one hell of a trip to make.
You're not taking that one as your first option.
No. No.
This is like wartime effort.
Mediterranean, go to Malta, Italy. Yeah. No. Canada. Let's do that.
Sit in a boat.
Do you know what? Why Canada when I could go all the way to the Falkland Islands?
There you go.
You know?
Yeah, but Canada does sit in that position where, in terms of immigration, it's even flying in. The paperwork that you need, the proof, because we have some sort of I've only heard of it from my students ever that they talk about immigrating, and it's like you have to it's kind of like what China has with the foreign experts visa, but Canada has like
what's it?
The necessary whatever the required the desired skill set that Canada needs at that time. It's like we don't need musicians necessarily. We need engineers, people with those types of skills.
That's one route. There's also the other route that's based on a point system.
Right.
And if you have enough points, then you can move. In that system, a way to get the most points is to get a job offer, basically.
Right.
And that's quite difficult to get because, you have to
jobs
advertise.
Need to have proof that you're in the country or that you can work there. Proof.
Well, a lot of because there is a portal where you can look for jobs, but a lot of the jobs require for you to have permanent residence. So it's kind of a catch-22 situation.
The big quandary of being an expat.
But another thing is that if even with the jobs that you don't need that, there's a lot of ticker tape of that needs to be done for a job to be available for a person who's not a permanent resident.
Right.
And then the tax system, the taxing on that position is just slightly different from what I understand.
Well, the taxes is easy in Canada. If you make money, the government takes it.
Yes, but if you...
But you have to tell the government how much you made, and you have to know how much to pay.
But I think I could be wrong. As an employer, if you are employing someone that is fresh off the boat with no...
Or like a non-resident or a foreign alien resident.
Then you're paying higher taxes on that
There's
person.
a withholding tax that they have to pay, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
So in most cases, as an employer, why the hell would I want to do that? So it's quite difficult to get those points.
Oh wow.
However, so there are different routes that you can take. So, as a government that allows for different ways for people to come in and be productive citizens, I applaud.
Mm-hmm.
What I really liked, at least about Toronto, because I went to Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver, what I really liked about Toronto was the fact that it was so diverse. Similar in how, in my experience of European, like certain cities in European countries, but with the addition that all these diversities were actually interacting with each other.
Right.
And being friendly. Whereas in certain cities in Europe, yes, you have the diversity, but it's very sort of separated.
That community there,
Exactly, you have enclaves, where even when you do get to certain parts of the city where there is diversity, people are just not interacting with each other. There's no like groups where everyone's like laughing and smiling and so that I was very sort of taken by that.
I guess I've never really thought of it that way, but I know that all of my Canadians compatriots are going, you picked Toronto. Toronto's like the hated child.
It's not that I picked Toronto. The school that I'm interested in happens to be in Toronto. I feel like I just went for one visit, and it was a whirlwind of a visit trying to cover the 3 cities. Just those 3 cities. I mean, Canada's flipping massive,
Yeah. The prairies are screaming, why don't you come to Saskatoon? You're trying to go live in the middle of the prairies. I'm not sure what the TCM...
and that's another thing. It's also looking
the community
at
itself.
where as a person who's wanting to open a clinic or to work with people like-minded people, where would it be best to... I mean, at the end of the day, we live in a world where the monetary system is what it is, so I need to think of where my clinic, my business is going to support me. and maybe going to live out in the middle of nowhere.
Well, and getting the supplies, because Toronto you're going to get, you know,
It's
daily
a lot
flights,
easier,
daily,
exactly.
and it's a port. Same with Vancouver would
Exactly.
be the other place, but like Saskatoon, I mean that's at least a 17-hour truck
Yeah.
ride from
And
Vancouver.
Taobao,
Doesn't exist.
you have not.
Oh no, shipping to Saskatoon
God.
would be, it's 3 weeks at least.
I think
Like
my
you-
biggest shock of moving abroad is the non-Taobao culture.
And the non-QR code culture, and the whole like you have to pay. You guys don't take credit cards. China doesn't use credit cards, and the rest of the world doesn't use digital payments just yet.
China does use credit cards.
Not very often. WeChat and
No.
Alipay are far more.
Well, before WeChat and Alipay, China used credit cards more.
Right.
Now they don't even take cash
No.
because
Like,
you got
oh,
WeChat
cash.
and Alipay.
Well, and
QR
then
code.
also with the cash, it was an authenticity issue. That became a big problem with the 100 kwai and the 50
Yeah, but
kwai.
they just changed it.
Again, they had to
Exactly.
because the first ones were paper. You're like, that's not a good idea.
So
Yeah, well, Toronto, I do have to admit that Toronto's not a bad city, and I know people who live there. I know people who have lived there, and in terms of, especially for a person like you, who has lived all over the place, Toronto's probably a good fit. Unless you really wanted to chill the fuck out and like be at one with the earth, then you go to the prairies,
okay.
which
I was
would be
thinking Vancouver.
Vancouver's like if you want to do a lot of the outdoorsy stuff like
Yeah.
climbing mountains and stuff. If you just want like peace and
Oh,
quiet
okay. Gotcha.
and like kilometers we use in Canada, and just you'd
Thank
still
God.
you'd still have outdoor
Metric
activities.
system.
A lot of hockey. You'd probably have to learn how to play hockey if you're in the middle of the prairies.
Well, fun fact, Kuwait actually had quite a good hockey team.
and then you left, and then now
and
they're
then I
they're,
left.
they're shit.
No, it was during my uncle's days. So he was part of the Kuwait hockey team, and
No way.
we used to go. Yeah, we used to go and see him train. So the Middle Eastern country, well, the Arabian Peninsula countries used to play against each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then he busted his knees and
Oh,
he
jeez.
stopped playing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so my uncle was in the hockey team, and 3 of my aunts used to figure skate.
Wow.
So ice skating
Did not
is
know.
a thing in the desert. So, yeah.
Did not know. Okay, I'll have to look this up. I mean, when did your uncle play? Back in the 80s or 90s?
90s it would have been.
Did they ever go to the Olympics at all?
No.
No, they weren't that. They weren't that good.
No, Kuwait. It's a monarchy. And it's a very kind of hands-on monarchy.
Okay.
So if you had a prince or a princess or whatever that was interested in a particular thing, then a lot of
okay.
money was
Right.
funneled into that particular thing. So in the 70s, there was one prince that really liked football particularly,
Right.
but at the time, to be honest, I don't know what his position was within the government. But yeah, he was an advocate of sports.
Mhm.
So a lot of money went into sports, and it was during that time that Kuwait actually made it to the World Cup.
Oh.
If you ask Ben,
Okay.
Mr.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. He will tell you, I don't remember now, it was sometime in the 80s where they actually made it to the
Final Four? I don't know.
not the Final Four.
But
before
you're
that.
talking football, European football, not American style.
Yes, I'm talking soccer
Soccer.
for the rest of the world.
Canada.
That
That's
world.
Canada speak. I mean, you go to.
Is it soccer there?
Yeah, if you
Oh,
say
I
football,
will
they're
be
gonna
going
think
around
Los Angeles.
teaching everyone.
Toronto.
Football, you play with your feet.
Toronto wants an NFL team. Like you're moving to Toronto. Toronto is the most Americanized or the most American-like city in Canada. Yeah, they want an NFL team. They are the only one that has an NBA team. Vancouver used to have an NBA team, but it died again. Toronto has the Raptors that went to the finals last year. So and
They
it's
won.
weird. Oh yeah, they won. Yeah, I didn't even know that. That's why I see kids around here wearing Toronto Raptors jerseys and shirts. I'm like, Where'd you get that from? Is that a misprint from the factory? No slight intended, but let's be honest, all the shirts are made here anyway. And I see them wearing it going, okay, no, it's not a misprint. So, like, why? Oh, because the Toronto Raptors actually made it to something. But yeah, they want an NFL team as well. They have a soccer team that plays in the American leagues. Vancouver also has a soccer team as well. Winnipeg doesn't. My hometown does not. But yeah, if you go there, it's going to be soccer, not football. But so anyway, I mean, so Kuwait.
I will be calling it football.
Yeah, if you're in Toronto, you'll be considered international if you're calling it. Is if the feet, not the hand. But
so what do they call it in Quebec?
Oh, probably soccer.
No.
Yeah.
But no.
But yeah, they're Quebecois.
They're Quebecois, yes, but they
They have a staunch French European connection. Well,
exactly.
They do have.
Not to.
Montreal does have a soccer team. They also have a football team, like American style football as well, and hockey team as well.
I'm surprised. I would have thought that they had a rugby team rather than an American.
Rugby is
football
the
team.
People are gonna hate me for this. It's like the unspoken popular sport. It seemed like with lacrosse, there's whole leagues dedicated to it that travel internationally.
Okay.
People, and you'll meet people, especially in Toronto. You're gonna meet these people. Winnipeg, because the city's so, it's spread out. It's far away from everything. But and everyone in Winnipeg is sort of like a jack of all trades. They all play different sports.
Okay.
There's not just one sport that they play. But yeah, Toronto, Vancouver, all of the very big cities are going to have a rugby team, if not two, that will play internationally. And there's a Canadian rugby team,
okay.
so a Canadian lacrosse team that travels and they appear in the Olympics.
Cool, okay.
So yeah, it's properly represented.
Okay.
But whether or not you see like a rugby guy walking down the street, not in Winnipeg, Toronto maybe.
Okay.
Same with like soccer players, football players. You're going to see them in Toronto much more than you'd see them in Winnipeg.
Fair enough.
But yeah, something like that. Yeah, so you're going to Canada, hopefully, the next couple of years. Some people would actually question why you're not going to Montreal. Speaking of doing the CELTA, I did my CELTA in Montreal because it was my chance to go to Montreal and live there. And I cannot lie when I say it is a better city. It is
definitely a nice city.
Gorgeous city. The only one better apparently is Quebec City is apparently nicer than Montreal. Yeah, oh yeah, everybody talks about Quebec City architecture.
Well, I kind of wanted to go to Canada in winter to kind of rip the Band-Aid off and say, right, this is Canadian winter. Girl from the woman, from the desert, can I hack it?
Yeah.
I went in November,
right.
So not exactly winter.
Shoulder season.
So I was in Toronto. It already snowed by then, but it was warmish, like
right.
Because when it snows, it needs to be 0 degrees, or that's the
around there in Canada. It can happen anyway.
So anyway, and I went. A friend of mine, who is a musician here in China, but also she's Canadian. She's also a musician in Canada, and then came here. Blah blah. Anyway, spare you the details. She was playing for a folk festival in Montreal.
Oh, okay.
Le Mondial.
Okay.
So she was going to Montreal, and I thought, great, I'll go too. So it was actually, just by chance that I ended up in Montreal, but it's cold. It's really, really cold.
Oh, you wouldn't hack it in my hometown.
It was funny. We ended up meeting a Chinese person there. So yeah, like the second night that I was at these events, I was with this Chinese guy.
You're speaking Chinese.
And
the Chinese person's
in
like,
Canada.
What the
exactly.
hell?
I was well impressed with myself actually, because every time I stop speaking Chinese, I forget things and I feel and I convince myself that my Chinese is actually really bad. And then I get pushed into a situation where I need to use it, and I can actually have conversations for the whole day with this person in Chinese. So I impressed myself. He was quite impressed as well. But yes, at the end of the night, it was 2 o'clock, and I'm trying to get back to my Airbnb. I don't know what the hell the temperature was, but it was cold.
-2 Celsius.
No.
Oh, November -10 maybe. If it
Something
was,
like that. -10, -15, something like that. So I'm sitting there waiting for the night bus. I finally get on the night bus, and because things are different in Canada to China. I mean, something as simple as, you know, using, what was I using? Google Maps or whatever.
Right.
And yeah, it was seeing the bus number, the route that I was supposed to take, with a / and then another bus number.
You can take either one.
No, in China that means you can take either one. There, it meant that I needed to change buses at some point.
Oh,
so
yeah. Oh,
I
okay.
didn't get off at the stop that I was supposed to get off at.
Oops.
And at some point, I ended up somewhere else, and I was just like, "What the hell?" I wasn't paying attention because I was texting on my phone like an idiot. 2 o'clock in the morning. You don't know where you're going. Pay attention. So I get off, plug in the address on Google Maps again. Needed to walk for like 2 kilometers to another bus stop. By then it was already 3 in the morning. Fucking freezing. Pardon my French. So I get to the bus stop, 3:30, let's say, 3:30, and I'm waiting, and waiting,
and it's not
and
coming because it's delayed.
and waiting. And for some stupid reason, Uber wasn't working. Like my payment thing wasn't. It was just disconnected. It wouldn't allow me to pay. I couldn't use Lyft. I couldn't use anything. And every time I took my hands out of the gloves to like use my phone, it like searing pain in the fingers. Putting the gloves back on, shoving them under my armpits, rubbing, like trying to get the blood moving. And then at some point, I finally see this bus, and I'm thinking,
just get on anyway.
Get on. No, it's the bus that I was
Okay.
waiting for. And then the bus just fucking drives by. And I'm standing there going, what the hell? So, didn't stop. Just drove on past.
Jeez.
And I'm thinking, oh, hell no. What the hell am I supposed to do now? 6 kilometers away from my Airbnb. Ended up walking. So I walked.
And that's your introduction to Canada?
No, that was my introduction to Montreal.
Montreal.
So yeah, got into the Airbnb, echanesia'd the crap out of myself.
Oh.
Was supposed to have a Tinder date the next day. Cancelled that.
With a Canadian, you gotta show up anyway and be like, what the hell did I do wrong? What happened here?
I was starting to feel a bit of a tickle in the back of my throat, and I was supposed to fly the day after.
You were in Montreal, awake at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you had gone to La Banquise already, right?
What's that?
It's the poutine place.
Oh no, I didn't
The
know.
only place that you go at 3 o'clock in the morning is to go get poutine at La Banquise, which is just down by Saint Denis, and it's it's not down, it's literally down the street, but it's a walk. Yeah, I mean, that's where you go at that early in the morning, no matter what.
Well, I walked at the bus stop where I took where I took the only bus, because the other bus just left me.
That's terrible.
Left me hanging. So yeah, the bus stop that, the first bus stop I was at, there was a restaurant right next to it. I didn't have change for the bus, so I thought, alright, so I'll get some poutine.
Of course.
Get some change for the bus. Get on the bus.
Yeah.
But again, like you on Google Maps or Apple Maps, I'm not sure which one, it tells you how long you have to wait for the bus. And I only had 15 minutes, or 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So I walked in, asked how long it would take for them to make a poutine, and he said more, a time that was
16
more.
16 minutes.
Yeah,
20 minutes.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like, ah, damn it. All right, so it's not gonna happen. Can I please just have change for the bus?
Yeah.
And yeah, very friendly. Gave me change. I waited for the bus. Got on the bus. So that was strike one for Montreal.
Missing the bus. Yeah, well, it's terrible. I mean, because you're freezing.
Well, no, just freezing.
Yeah.
I mean, if I had missed the bus and it was a nice summer day,
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
or if I missed the bus and winter was not that bad.
Not that bad. It's a
And
nice
this
warm
isn't even
day.
winter, man.
Yeah, it was November.
This is like November. So, yeah. Strike 2 was that, yes, you had the diversity, but it wasn't as integrating. Like, it wasn't as friendly. Like, you could still see the separation between...
From who though? I think I know who you're talking about, because there's a split right through the middle of Montreal, French and English.
No,
That's
it
one of
wasn't
them.
that.
What else is it? Because that's one of the greatest divides. Like if you grew up on this side
Yeah.
and you speak English or French, you belong to that. If you grew up on that side, it's another one. I mean, it's one of the massive divisions in Montreal that still leads to fights these days.
Okay. For me as an outsider, and I could be wrong, this is just my experience, it was more the new immigrants
Oh, okay.
and the European immigrants.
Is it
Well, the
racially
Euro-
divided?
Yes, it's racially
Right,
divided.
like black, white
Yeah.
sort of issue.
Well, people of color, I wouldn't say black per se,
Okay.
but people of color and the European Caucasian.
Because a lot of Montreal, they do have a sizable black community, but they also have a lot of like Turkish or from like the Mediterranean, that
Yeah.
area, and
But they're considered people of color.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
they and like the Montreal also has, well, there's a lot of French people there, and that like the Western European
Yeah.
side of the continent
Yeah.
basically. So you also experienced that
Yeah.
division. How bad was it?
It's not bad if I don't compare it to Toronto.
Toronto wins. But that's only strike 2.
There were only 2 strikes.
Oh, okay.
There wasn't a third.
There wasn't a third. There didn't need to be a
So
third one.
there's still room.
Yeah. No.
But,
in that case, then I would.
And
fully
also
agree.
having to learn French, but that for me is not a strike. It's just basically having to sit my lazy butt down and remember the things that I did learn, up until high school.
Mhm.
Well, mid high school.
Right.
And also my ex stepfather, having been from a francophone country, Cameroon, and we used to travel we used to spend some summers in France. So it's not that I don't have the ear for it. I do understand things still, but it's also, second language, third language. Yeah, Chinese has now become
Second language.
my second language. So when I want to say something in French, the first thing that comes out
Is it Chinese?
is Chinese.
Yeah.
Which, funnily enough, I was in Montreal,
Speaking Chinese.
just got on the bus, and the bus driver asked, I don't know what it was. I don't know who said what first, but at some point I said something in Chinese to him, and I was just like, nah, man, what are you doing? Wrong language.
The bus driver was like,
Yeah, exactly. What?
this doesn't compute in
Exactly.
what I just heard to you. It just doesn't make sense to me all of a sudden.
Exactly.
You expanded
So-
his horizons.
So yeah.
Yeah, I can see it though, and then how you would want to go to Toronto in that sense. And I'd actually say that that's what your international upbringing
Yeah.
is more suited towards Toronto than any
But
other.
then you go to Vancouver, and it's just
But it's
beautiful.
is it?
It's-
Outside of Vancouver is nice. I mean, downtown Vancouver is also, you got sketchy area. Did you
You
go
got
down
sketchy area.
Did you go down Hastings at all?
No, but downtown Vancouver is tiny.
Oh yeah, it's like one street.
Exactly.
It's so
Which-
comical. Vancouver is a big city. You talk about it and everything, and then you go down. Was it Granville Avenue? And that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And but
Which is a bit disappointing.
it is, but it's also very dense in that sense of everything that you want to do downtown is downtown. There's
Fair
no
enough.
you have to take a bus out to the suburbs to go
Fair
anywhere.
enough. And transport in Vancouver isn't as it's not as facilitated as in Toronto. You just have the buses. You don't even have Uber. You just have Lyft.
You have 2 lines on the subway. I think there's
Exactly.
I know the
Which,
third one
exactly,
when I was there. I mean, oh yeah, no, I was looking, because my brother lives a bit away from the downtown. I'm going, there's only 2 lines, and you have to wait 7 minutes for the train. This is a developed country. We're the rest of the train.
Exactly. And I saw 3 black people while I was there. 3.
That's it. You could count them.
One of them was a father and a son, so that's 1 in 1. So 2, really. 2.5. So yeah, that was.
Yeah, you wouldn't see much of a. But I mean, there is a large Indian and Pakistani population.
Yes, and apparently an Arab population as well.
But the Arabs
and
are all
an
over.
Iranian, Persian population. Which again, yes, okay.
Toronto has a large
I
population
do
as well.
identify as a black person, but I'm Arab.
Yeah.
So I'm Afro-Arab, if you want a proper term for it. So my background is it's very specific, which makes my life a little bit more complicated. So yeah, if I'm looking, which it part of me looking for the next, well, part of what I'm looking for in my next step is the idea of belonging.
Right.
So yeah, there's the outward, but there's also the inward sort of experience of life based on my outward appearance. But then on top of that, you have the other layer of my culture.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, my international culture. So all of that put together is quite a lot of boxes that I would need to tick if I'm looking for the
whole package.
The whole package.
Sort of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, it sounds like
so,
you really have only, as international as you are, if you aren't feeling at home at Beijing, which, I mean, I can't imagine why, in this such inclusive society that we live in, I mean, it sounds like it's going to be London, Toronto, New York, like somewhere like that, where you would have that same sort of, where you meet people who are in the exact same.
Well, just availability of pockets of people at least, so yeah.
Yeah, Toronto's not a bad choice. I mean, I all of Canada shits on Toronto, but because Toronto gets all the attention, and that's where the financial district is anyway, and everything. But that whole corridor, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, it's like living in China in terms of accessibility to other things to go do.
Yeah.
Hey, do you want to go to Montreal today? Yes.
Well, that's
for
what
the
I
day?
did.
Yes.
I didn't go for the day. I went for 5 days. But yeah, I hopped on a bus.
Because Montreal can do that.
Exactly. I hopped on a bus from Toronto. Was there in 5 hours.
5 hours. Okay. That's 2.5 to Ottawa.
And
Ottawa's also a pretty city because it's the capital, and they
Okay.
get the others. One friend put it, there's no needles on the streets. That's one way to put it. Vancouver, there's needles on the streets, whereas Ottawa, you wouldn't find it because they clean up all the parks.
Okay. My friend, well, the person that I ended up staying with in Vancouver was a friend of a friend, and I'm guessing her area was a nice area because
Well,
I don't remember.
Depends where it is. If it's outside in the burbs, it's going to be better.
It wasn't the burbs per se, but it was like the in between.
Anywhere close to downtown,
No.
any of those parks, gotta be careful. Watch where you step. Keep your shoes on. The first time I was in Toronto, I was like, there's this rock band in that was based out of Vancouver, and they had this song called Crackballs. And they had toured. The reason I remember this so vividly is because they were the first band at the first bar that I got into when I was 16 or 15. Right, so it was like already I was there.
And you heard a song called Crackballs.
Well, that was their encore. So ever since that day when I heard this Crackballs, and they talk about this street called Hastings, and I'm like, oh, Hastings, and it's kind of like whenever you hear a song, anybody sing about a certain area, it's like all this sort of poetry, and so I'd never really looked up Hastings before. I probably should have. So I land in Vancouver. And one of the guys I went to graduate school with, he's like, well, so do you have any ideas what you want to do in Vancouver? And I'm like, well, yeah, I'd like to go see Hastings. And he's just like, the fuck? No, you don't. Why? Why? Like, he's looking at me, and I
How old were you then?
Well, that'd have been late 20s at that point. Okay. Just after I returned from traveling. Right. But so I was like, go mode, let's travel, let's see everything. This, I'd heard about, I studied Rome. I went to Rome. I wanted to go to London, so I went to London. I want to teach English overseas. I taught English. Let's go to Hastings. He's like, and I kind of wonder what went through his head. I don't know if he ever looked at my arms just to verify if like, who are you? Like, do you know what you just said? And because I had no idea. And he's like, yeah, no, you don't want to go there. And so I was like, okay, all right, fine. I met 2 friends that time. The next friend I went to, he was like, yeah, no, I'll drive you through there. And it was like literally, look, keep your windows rolled up. We'll drive through and like see all the poor people, all the drug addicts. And it was like, holy shit, it exists.
Crack balls.
Crack balls. I'm like, oh, that's what crack balls is. It's a drug. Took 10 years to figure that one out. But that's where all the drug addicts basically go to winter.
Yeah,
Montreal is like a little bit different, but yeah. So a very storied city, Vancouver in that sense. But yeah, it sounds like Toronto will be a good choice for you.
At least for the beginning. At the end of the day, yeah, I'll see where my feet land, really.
Yeah. Well, I did say it before. I think when you said, well, actually, I was aware that your 2-year time limit in China was coming up, and it actually made me a little bit sad. I was like a little bit taken aback, emotional. And this was also part and parcel because the landlord asked me about renting, and like you, everything's done in segments here. So it's either a 1-year visa, 1-year lease, or rental contract. So it's always like, I'm going to be here for another year. Or it's like, oh, I'm going to be here, you know. And then you see the people leaving who are like, well, I'm leaving in 3 months. You're like, ah. And as an expat, as a foreigner, you're kind of used to it. And you do it to a lot of people too.
Yeah.
You're the flightiest people in the world.
Yeah.
But that's also sort of the charm of it, that you do have that churn of friends and acquaintances. But yeah, when I was aware that your 2 years is coming up, it sounds like it's being extended now just because of COVID, and because you're a neighbor basically. So I mean, having you leave, it's going to be an empty space basically, and a lot of our colleagues are leaving. A lot of them, it seems like.
You'll be the last one. I mean, it was me, you, and Craig in Building 8, and he left.
Craig didn't like being here. At least he never
No,
seemed very.
No, he didn't so much.
And he was living with other people, which I pay this stupidly high rental fee here because I'm like, I'm not living with people. Some of the newer examiners, especially the younger people, they're like, oh, why don't you have a roommate? I'm like, no.
Been there, done that.
No, because when you work 6 days in a row out of Beijing, you're coming home. I want to chill the fuck out.
Yeah. I have to admit. I mean, I've always been lucky with my roommates because, in all honesty, I've never wanted to live with strangers. So
Right.
I've always lived with friends.
Mm-hmm.
Or people that I've met that we were friendly. That's one person, by the way. So I met, we got friendly, and then we moved in together.
Right.
Yeah, but like the idea of like finding someone off of Craigslist or something and moving. What? Why? Why
What?
would you do that?
Murder alert.
I mean, people do it and it's great for them, but no, that's my personal space, and I want to know that we will get along.
Yeah, that there is personality, like some sort of connection there. At
Right.
least like friendliness. If I want to sleep with strangers, it'd be at hostels. That's my extent of
Oh
like.
God, Jesus! I did my hostel experience was later on in life.
When?
My first hostel experience was when I visited Barcelona. I was 25,
26?
no, 27, 28.
That's the same as me, basically. First time I went to London, I stayed in a hostel.
If you're not hosteling like in your early 20s, by late 20s you're already not wanting to party so much. At least for me. I worked in a bar for 7 years while I was studying in Cyprus.
Oh, jeez.
So I did the nightlife.
Right.
My friends were DJs. They organized festivals. Like if I wanted to do the whole drinking and not even drinking, like I really got into the music. So
Right.
there were occasions where I would go out somewhere and not drink and dance until 6 o'clock in the morning.
Is that possible?
Yeah, it is if you
Wow.
like the music. So I've done that. So the partying the getting drunk and loud and rowdy and whatever, like I wasn't
You
really
didn't need
doing
that
that.
anymore,
Yeah, for some time. So to go and stay in a hostel where people were being rowdy and getting, you know, stumbling into the room at like 3 a.m, and while
This guy.
I was thinking, okay, I'm already bed trying to get to sleep so that I can go and see the architecture, like, you know, the next
wow.
day at like 28. Yeah, and then I went to India. When I was here, my friends in London, two of them moved to India. One of them is Indian descent, British. The other one Spanish, and then one's an architect, so he moved to Goa, and started working. Yeah, but yeah, he I know him because he's friends with the DJ friends that all were DJ'd psychedelic trance. That was the music that I liked. Music that I still like. So yeah, so I went there, and I ended up staying at the cheaper, not, I wouldn't say cheaper hostel, but in comparison to this other Spanish friend of mine who was teaching Spanish at a very, very expensive international school on the other side, like near Kerala. So we all met, like friends from London, friends in India, we all met in Goa. And she stayed with the boyfriend at this like boutique, you know, really nice swanky place, and I stayed across the street in the hostel. I mean, it was nice, but it was the hostel,
Right.
cheaper, you know, option in comparison to where she was staying. And yeah, it was like, you know, early 20-year-olds coming in drunk and like, you know, and whatnot, and me, you know, in my 30s going, what am I doing in this picture?
You kids keep it down out there.
But then I was the one, like, on the beach listening to psychedelic trance, like, until 7 o'clock in the morning.
But you were completely sober and actually you actually remember that
I
night.
was sober, but
Well-
I wasn't stumbling in, like, you know, I know how to behave.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was late 20s, mid 20s when I first experienced hostel, and I was that guy, was party. My one regret about my first European backpacking experience was I should have taken more pictures because I don't remember much of it. And I remember pretty much every second day waking up with a hangover.
And that's the thing, you hit like a certain age where the recovery period starts being a little bit more difficult.
I don't know. I'm upper 30s. I'm doing well. I don't get bad hangovers. I don't know what happened. My liver seems to deal with it. I don't drink as excessively as I used to, and I certainly don't change substances. So I mean, and my beverages.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I drink. The reasons I spend money on these craft beers is because the ingredients they use are a little bit more pure than some
There's
of the
that,
other
and I've
ones.
also learned to do the one drink, one glass of water, one drink, one glass of water. Look at me being an adult.
The best, not the best advice, but I remember this Polish girl one time saying to me, because she saw me drinking everything, she's like, yeah, there's the law of percentages. You start low and then you work your way up. You don't go beer, shot, wine, beer, shot. Bad idea. You can go beer, then wine, then shots, but you cannot go back to beer after
The
that.
thing is, I've sort of regressed in that because I don't drink as much. I don't have my nights out where I'm drinking. Here in Beijing, at least, I know Shanghai has a little bit more diversity in their entertainment. But being a little bit of an electronic music snob, I've gone out, I've experienced, and it's very much hit and miss here. A lot more miss than hits.
Really?
That's not to say that I haven't had good like music nights, like some really random, really random occasions where I either like by accident end up in a place and it's a really good night, or the one time I was actually really surprised. I ended up At some point, I was looking at, because you know how we have the WeChat groups and whatnot, and the official account. So I was following a particular club, and they invited this guy, this German guy that was playing. He basically spent, because I ended up talking to him at the end of the night, and he was traveling around North Africa and really ended up loving the music. In Egypt. It started in Egypt, I think. Could be wrong. Sorry. Where he met this woman who had this old like cassette and record store, and he just bought a whole bunch of cassettes and records of like Arabic music in like the 60s, 70s, 80s.
Like electronic stuff, or just like traditional
soul, funk, like a mix of these things. And so they invited him to play, and they had like a clip. Well, the whole set that he played in Beirut, in the boiler room in Beirut. And for me, you know, a Kuwaiti in frickin' Beijing, this guy was gonna come and play Arabic music and North African music in Beijing. I'm going. And it was brilliant.
Which
At some
club was
point,
this?
Dada.
Okay.
At some point, he played like a few tracks of things that I would listen to when I was like 10.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it brought tears to my eyes of just the ridiculousness of the situation. Like, again, as Arabs, wherever we travel to, it's very, very rare, especially in certain parts of the Arab world, like where I come from in the Gulf. We do travel, but we're not that many.
Right.
So it's really rare to come across someone who speaks your dialect of Arabic.
Really?
And it was 2 occasions here where I stepped into the university, and there was a Saudi Arabian guy that was studying with me, and it's like, holy crap! In the 30 years, well, 20 some years that I lived abroad, I never had a chance to use my dialect of Arabic. I never spoke it with anyone outside of Kuwait.
Right.
And there's this guy now in Beijing where I'm speaking my dialect of Arabic. And then I go to a club and this guy's playing
the music,
you know, of things that I used to listen to when I was like a kid. So...
Well, China has that pull now. I mean, it does.
Yeah.
It's pulling people from all over.
But China's it's a strange collection of experiences. I find, like, you never think certain things, and it happens. And to be honest, that's what I find is the beauty of China, and this is what I love about being here. Just the randomness of events that are either Chinese or Western. It's West because China is as far east as I've been. Anyway, but yeah, it's a mixed bag of experiences that, all in all, are all positive, because even the bad, you learn and you make decisions, and you're out of these experiences.
It can become like a funny story sometime later on, or it's like you learn something and someone else says something, and you're like, well, actually, this is how it is, based on my experience. Have you ever thought about moving down to Guangdong at all? Or Guangzhou?
I don't really. If I move, then I'm leaving China.
I'm gone. Yeah.
Yeah, to be honest, like, I've also moved around a lot in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And if I were to move south, then to what, continuing in the job that we're doing now.
Yeah,
if I'm going to make a change, then it's going to make a change in hopes of transitioning out of education and starting to
doing
practice.
Something else. Yeah.
So yeah, no, I wouldn't want. I would love the opportunity to go and live in a different cities in China, but.
Doing what, you know?
Not so much like. At this point, I came here with an agenda, and yeah, it's coming to an end. So. It's coming to an end.
End of an era.
Well, my era of being here, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm committed. until two things happen. Beijing 2022, so the Olympics. I've never lived in a city with Olympics before. So that requires 2 more renewals, this one being the first one. The second one is Chinese fluency, at least according to the current HSK standards. So this year I'm finishing HSK 5 books. Like that's why I'm working part-time mostly. I'm not doing 6 days like other people. But all of next year is going to be HSK 6. And HSK 6 is like your 5,000 characters, 5,000 words. And what they're doing actually, speaking of like how you're always going to be the outsider with the Chinese medicine, is that they're restructuring the HSK system to accommodate people like you who are studying specific fields. So bands 7, 8, 9 target that sort of fluency, that ability, so that you can work in China in your field. So not that you're just.
But it's separate. It's not that you have to go from 1 to 7, 8, 9.
I'm pretty sure you don't. Right now, you don't have to either. It's not
so
like
it's 1 to 6, and then you have a choice of doing 7, 8, or.
No. You can, if you want to rock on up and go for the 9, you can. If your Chinese is that good, right? It's not like other standardized tests that people show up and they're like, oh well, I want a 7, or whatever, and you're going.
Which test are you talking about?
Well, I mean, there are many standardized tests out there, but there are some times where you're like, I don't know what to say to you. But because students say it as well. Students come on and they're like, oh yeah, well, I'm easily this. And you're going, no, you're not. You're not that. And to get to that, you, first of all, should probably show up to class more often than you have.
Yeah.
And second of all, do your homework. Inside and outside of class. But yeah, so that's what they're doing with the HSK levels, and that's my commitment, is to all of next year's there's going to be HSK 6, which is not just going to be textbook work, but it's going to be like everything. Finance would be sort of the stuff that I would get into more. But
finance.
Why not? Because I've been interested in it. I trade North American stocks as it is, so I have that interest and I'm familiar with the terminology. It's one thing that I can sort of grasp onto and see how it could progress later on after ESL living. But whether or not it's like, I don't want to go work for a bank, I don't want to work for any firm, I don't care for any of that. It's just something that you can bridge, and that, I guess, the one thing that pushes me through my Chinese studies is being a translator. That would be where it is. So those are the 2 commitments. After that, if I'm still here in 2 years, married or not, I don't know. I don't know. I did ask my girlfriend if she would move to the Middle East with me. She said no. So we'll see how that works. But I'm an optimist in that I'm like saying, we have a choice here.
You should just flash some money.
But I'm telling her this. I'm like, okay, so because she tells me how much she used to make in her job, and I'm like, okay, that's just above poverty. According to like official standards. Or we could move to the Middle East and make stupid amounts of money, doing whatever, find a job. But her fear is that she's going to be that foreigner, that expat, that she won't have that community. I'm like, I understand that.
Oh, but there are Chinese people in Kuwait now, man. Last time I went.
Right, but try explaining that to someone who's never imagine going to Toronto and meeting that person who's like never lived outside of his postal code.
Fair enough.
I mean, you just like, no, the people are everywhere. It's bizarre how you can do it.
They weren't when I was growing up.
Right.
I'll tell you.
Now they are. I mean,
But in all honesty, it could also have been that I just didn't know they were Chinese. But now it was going back. Exactly, it was going back, and hearing the Chinese and going, oh my god. Oh my god.
I know that language.
Exactly.
You speak Chinese. Zhongwen ma. Zhongwen ma. Yeah. All right. Well, I've taken a lot of your time. Thank you very much for joining me today. I appreciate it. I think everyone appreciates the chit chat about Chinese medicine, living abroad, and then your plans to move to Canada. I think that's very exciting, and we'll speak again. Who knows? Either when you're in Canada or when your plans to Canada have failed, not that they will, pay.
Exactly.
Or who knows, maybe the next time we meet in the next big city, whenever it is.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers.